hearing to order. My name is John Hudak. I'm the director of the Maine Office of Cannabis Policy. I've got a lot of detail that I need to say according to the Maine Administrative Procedure Act. So just bear with me. It'll be a few minutes of housekeeping notes. The purpose of the hearing today is to invite testimony from members of the public regarding the proposed rules of the Maine Office of Cannabis Policy, which seek to revise the regulations governing Maine's medical use of cannabis program. As I said, I have a few process-oriented instructions for today's hearing. First, the emergency exits for this facility are located on the first floor. In the event of an emergency, please exit quietly through the nearest unblocked exit and continue out across the parking lot. Today, we're taking public comment in this room, and there are 2 overflow rooms on this floor as well. There are staircases located at both ends of this building, and emergency exits are on the ground floor. Second, we know there's great interest in this public hearing today, so it will be live streamed on YouTube for members of the public who are unable to join us in person. We'll be taking testimony in this room and ask that individuals wishing to testify make their way to the front row to queue up to give remarks. We ask that once you've finished providing any oral remarks, you make your way out of this room to make room for individuals who wish to provide remarks. We'll take a break about once an hour so that folks can stretch their legs and move between this room and overflow rooms. Many of you have communications devices. Please silence those devices for the duration of the hearing. If you need to take or make a call, please do so outside of the hearing room. Last, I serve as chair of this meeting and as such will make all decisions related to the meeting and participation. We ask that participants be respectful and appropriate with communication and activities. Because this public hearing is being live streamed, those giving testimony will be asked to come to the podium to be recognized. All comments should be directed to the Office of Cannabis Policy and remain germane to today's proceedings. No comment should be made to anyone else in the room. In the event comments are not directed to OCP staff and/or are not germane to today's proceedings, I'll ask that you return to your seat. The office will hear testimony from persons present who wish to speak for, against, or neither for nor against the proposed rules. In addition to providing feedback on the form and content of the proposed rules, members of the public may also pose questions about the rules. OCP staff will attempt to answer questions posed. If a question cannot be answered today, the office will send a written reply within a reasonable time after the hearing. So please ensure that you've provided your contact information on your registration form. Regardless of whether you testify in person today, you may submit written testimony to OCP. Forms have been made available in this room for that purpose, and written comment is also accepted after this hearing. Please be mindful that written submissions are public records and available to all interested parties once it's submitted. Persons testifying at the public hearing today are advised that the hearing is on a topic of significant public interest. At any time during the day, members of the media may be present to report on today's events. Individuals choosing to testify may be photographed, videoed, or have statements attributed to them, including in media coverage. If you wish to testify, please state your name, town of residence, and the organization you represent, if any, before beginning your remarks. To the extent possible, please identify which sections of the proposed rule your comments are referencing. If you're interested in providing testimony, please ensure that you've signed the testimony log with OCP staff outside of the room. Feedback from the public will be received in the following order: those speaking in favor of proposed rules, those speaking in opposition to the proposed rules, and those speaking neither for nor against the proposed rules. At the discretion of the chair, we may choose to rotate testimony to alternate viewpoints being expressed by those in the audience. Participants wishing to testify will be limited to 5 minutes each. Please prioritize your comments to those most important to you. You may submit, as I mentioned before, additional written materials to accompany your testimony or in lieu of verbal testimony. Please give at least 3 copies to OCP staff prior to beginning your testimony. There's no limit to the amount of written testimony that may be submitted, and the public comment deadline for this rulemaking is 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. Mailed testimony postmarked prior to the deadline but received by OCP afterward will be considered a timely submission. In deference to others here today, please keep all conversation to a minimum. If you need to engage in conversation or take a phone call, please step outside of the room. Finally, we will plan to take a brief break every hour to allow individuals to move between this room and the 2 overflow rooms on this floor. We'll ask people who have given their verbal remarks to move to the overflow rooms when we take a break to allow others from the overflow rooms to present their verbal remarks. We'll also plan to take a break for lunch around noon. All right, now that that's through, I'm joined this morning by some of my staff, Vern Malik, Lisa Roberts is coming. She's not here presently. Lexi Susi and Gabby Pierce. Would you all like to introduce yourselves? Vern?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Vern Malik. I'm the Deputy Director. I'm in charge of operations, so I oversee the licensing and compliance functions here at OCP.
Lexi?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lexi Susi. I'm the Director of Media and Stakeholder Relations here at the office.
Gabby?
I'm Gabby Pierce. I'm the Policy Director for the office.
And when Lisa arrives, we'll take a moment after the person who's testifying at that time for her to introduce herself as well. OCP's Director of Special Projects, Tracy Jakes, is also joining us in the room today. You'll also see OCP staff in the overflow rooms. Before we begin today's hearing, I want to address a few additional housekeeping related matters. In accordance with the Maine Administrative Procedure Act, we are required to publish notice of proposed rulemaking activity in the Secretary of State's Notice of Agency Rulemaking column at least 17 to 24 days prior to this public hearing. The notice for this hearing was published on September 6th, 2023 in the 5 major newspapers of Maine, with additional notices emailed to industry members and interested parties on September 6th, 2023. The statutory authority for rulemaking appears in Title 22, Chapter 558C. The last day to submit written public comment is 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. The major substantive rule included in the material for discussion at today's hearing consists of Chapter 2, Medical Use of Cannabis Program Rule. Once OCP completes the public comment period, we'll consider the feedback received and make appropriate revisions to the rule. Once we've incorporated feedback and made appropriate revisions of the major substantive rules considered today, we will provisionally adopt those rules and then submit them to the legislature for their consideration. The legislature will also accept public comment at a legislative hearing and determine whether to permit these rules to be adopted as is, with changes or not at all. Provided that the legislature permits the adoption of the major substantive rules, those rules will be adopted within 60 days of the effective date of any legislation permitting adoption. Major substantive rules like Chapters 2 become effective 30 days after final agency adoption. We'll now begin accepting public testimony. Attendees are reminded that the purpose of today's hearing is to receive public comment on the proposed rules developed by the Office of Cannabis Policy to revise Maine's medical use of cannabis program. Comments on changes that should occur to statute or Maine's adult use cannabis program are not germane to today's proceedings. With that said, I will start to call individuals based on the forms that they've filled out. We don't have any in favor at this time, so I'm going to start with those opposed.
That's not true. I was number 1 and I put yes. I thought I was opposed, so that's.
Okay. Oh, no, sorry. I said in favor, but I'm going to start with people opposed.
Sorry.
No worries.
I'm supposed to be at work right now, and
Okay.
as soon as I leave, I have to go back to work. I don't.
Okay, first up, we have Andalina Henderson. There we go.
That worked out well.
Good morning, Office of Cannabis Policy. Thank you so much for letting us speak. So I'll start off. My name is Andalina Henderson of Terrace, Maine. I'm a medical cannabis patient. I have 2 significant autoimmune diseases. I use cannabis at night for. I'm a founder of West Paris Provisions. I'm a woman business owner, multiple businesses, just not of West Paris Provisions. I'm a Navy veteran. I'm also a longtime volunteer in Maine Adaptive and Veterans No Boundaries. I'm a member of the West Paris Baptist Church, an active member, and I'm also a member of the VFW and American Legion. Being in the medical industry and volunteering with disabled veterans, the proposal is a direct attack on shops like mine and medical patients. The OCP is hiding behind claims of being beneficial for the health and safety of Mainers, when in reality it means to achieve their agenda, which is the death of medical cannabis in Maine. Because this is such an extensive bill, I picked a few to highlight my concerns. First and foremost, I'm disgusted with the time frame and lack of access to people to testify. The new language was made public on December 6th, with the public hearing today only 20 days later, and changes as well. I have dyslexia, I have severe learning disabilities. It's no way I could have made it through hundreds of pages. And some of it, I don't even think you've let us read yet anyway, so it doesn't matter. So to take time out of my busy life to verbally fight against the bill that would be the death of my livelihood and also the livelihood of all of my employees. On top of that, the removal of access to testify via Zoom has cut off the voice of many disabled patients. In my medical shop, 40% of my patients, they're either in a wheelchair, they have cancer, they're really sick. They really truly need this medication and they do not have the means to get here. Most of them have to get rides being in a wheelchair. This bill would directly impact and that couldn't make it here today and have the ability to read the proposed changes. An unfair tactic to silence medical patients who would speak out against these changes. Second, my husband is in remission for surviving stage 4 throat cancer. He's only been in remission about 2 years now. Part of this proposal would require him to find yet another doctor. All of you know there's a doctor shortage, especially in Maine. There's only a few people that would even, so what you're saying is you want them to go in, you want them to find a medical doctor, have a full physical, which is not covered under insurance. And I have private insurance. So I'm paying about $2,500 a month for my insurance and a $20,000 deductible. So now you're asking me to pay another $600 to $800 on top of that to go in and get a physical to get my main medical cannabis card. It's ridiculous, totally. How they can do it now is they call their doctor, they're asked a lot of questions. You just don't get it loosey-goosey. You really do have it to have a reason, as far as my opinion on what I've dealt with. So to make my husband go out and find another doctor when all he does is go to doctors now, he wouldn't do it. It would force him into the wreck. And this is exactly what this bill is proposing. It's forcing the patients to wreck. So I'll go ahead now. Third, the extreme financial cost of these proposed changes would bring a surefire way to knock out the medical industry, starting with fences. Under what grounds, as far as I can think of, have there been any recent concerns brought up in previous bills about fencing? They haven't been. And it's funny, when I put my fence in for my outdoor crop 4 years ago, I called compliance 4 times. 2 was inside Home Depot. I read the rules and regs. I did everything. When I got inspected about 1.5 years ago, my fence got hit. They said no, and I said, I said, I'll call compliance. I got my rules and regs books out. No, still didn't fly. So I went ahead of this guy to his boss. He said, oh yeah, you got everything, but it's up to the inspector. And the inspector says chain link, then you have chain link. So I think I have 3 or 4 fences now. I have a wooden one, I have a metal, I have a chain link, and I have black on top of that. So what's next? I'm ready for shock fences, barbed wire. I'm not sure what you want anymore.
And Elena,
I really don't.
the ring was your 5 minutes. Thank you for your comments. We'll be able to address some of the points that you made. To be clear, for individuals who are unable to attend today's hearing, as I noted in my opening remarks, any individual during the time window can submit written testimony up until October 10th. 10th, right? Yeah, it's in my notes. Sorry, let me get that right.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, October 10th at 11:59 p.m. All of the rules, all of the proposed rule changes have been submitted to the public as is required under the Maine Administrative Procedure Act. Do you want to fences?
Yeah, so just to be clear, the fencing requirement is not new. It's in statute, it's in the existing rule. So there have been questions raised around the experience that you've talked about, which is what is security fencing? And we have had issues around that, and we don't accept livestock fencing. We don't accept snow fences. things like that. So we're looking for a stockade or chain link, something better than wire mesh.
Right,
If
well,
it's
I
designed to
have
keep-
stockade.
If it's designed to keep deer out, it's not a security fence. So there have been issues around that. The other thing that you raised was around needing to get a new doctor. I don't believe we've made any changes to
Well, what
the
I read
requirements.
is what they're trying to propose is they're trying to make people go in and have a full physical to get.
There are no changes to the requirements. Those requirements are whatever the Board of Medicine requires for people. So we've made no changes at all. So your husband you should still be able to go through the same process to get a med card. That's not a change at all.
Okay, so they're still gonna be able to call on the telephone. and get their
Telemedicine,
med card and not have a full physical.
telemedicine is still approved. Now, what that provider requires is going to be up to the provider, the medical provider, whether you're seeing a doctor or a physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner or whatever that person requires. We don't control that. It's entirely up to the medical provider, what they require. And it always has been.
All right,
Staying on.
what I read, we were gonna have to start making appointments and going in and having a full physical.
No changes have been made there.
I would like to finish, but I guess I'm not gonna be able to.
You can submit those in writing. I think you have actually.
You have.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andelana. Next up is Mary Spencer.
You think we can tell us like 30 seconds before it's gonna end?
If you'd like, we can. Yeah, we don't want to throw people off their game, but if that's
Sure.
helpful, we can certainly give it 30 seconds.
Blink?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't have the wrong thing sheet, but
That's fine.
on 62F,
Mary, sorry, could you just introduce yourself for the record?
I'm Mary Spencer. I'm a medical patient, so I thought I was anonymous.
You don't have to say, just your name and the town you're from. So you
Yeah.
have to.
So Winthrop. I moved here because of a brain injury. And cannabis has really helped me stay away from a lot of the pain meds that the other doctors were throwing at me. I am medication free. And this is a right that I am so grateful that the state of Maine has allowed me to have. As far as 62F, bona fide medical provider patient relationship. A says conduct a full assessment of history, facilitate an encounter and do a physical exam. So that right there, what she said is in writing. You're trying to get us to have an encounter and do a physical exam. And ongoing monitor of the patient. The lady I go to, she knows my face. She's educated me. She knows my ailments. And I think that if you make people have a physical exam by this person, you're going to get rid of the online certification that so many Maynards need, because there was a point where I couldn't drive and I couldn't get to places, and I sure needed to be able to do that. So I just think that people in wheelchairs, a lot of disability people just can't get around. So, and back to the fence, a commercial fence. Now, last year, the electric went up 40%. I used to be able to grow for myself in the house, and I cannot. And now I rely on the outdoor. And after this year, it's been so rainy and horrible. It's been very difficult. And if you're requiring me to have another big heavy duty fence, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not as able-bodied as I like. And I'm not a commercial grow, so commercial fence should not be in there. And patient cultivation registry. Wasn't this resolved back in the 2010 era, somewhere around there? Why are we going backwards? Patients should not have to register and put their name out there. All we're trying to do is get by without taking medications that my farm is throwing down our throats. right after my accident, my doctor handed me a prescription of 300 Percocets. I'm like, why are you giving me so much? Can't I call and ask for some? I actually had to leave there and come where I can cultivate for myself because I can't afford to go to these stores and buy it. My body hurts. I hurt my spine. I hurt my brain. I've hurt so much. I need this medicine. And I'm afraid you're trying to take it away. I don't have much more to say. I don't like how you're holding some of these, the medical cannabis caregivers with the jars. You're testing the cannabis so much harder than you test the food in the stores that you're feeding us. I don't appreciate these new laws that you're applying to the people trying to take care of me. I love my gardeners. I know they're not putting pesticides on my stuff. They care about us. I mean, look how many people are here. So it's too much control on a thing that has been such a welcoming era. I'm really pretty much done.
Thank you.
I am a brain injury and without CBD, I'd be in a whole lot of trouble because I took seizure drugs. I can't take them. I'm so allergic to medication now because of a very, very severe reaction. So I need CBD in my life. I need THC just to get through. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Gabby, do you want to take the registration?
Yeah, so with respect to patient registrations and patient registry identification cards, we did our best in the rule to get rid of the patient registration requirements. However, the law continues to allow for voluntary registration of patients. And so that is what remains in the rule right now.
Are you trying to trick us?
No.
I mean, it seems like you're slipping in a thing that you're trying to get people to forget and approve and.
Nope.
Well, to be clear, and I'll say this from a policy standpoint, we don't want patients registering with us. We don't have a database of patients and we don't want one. I think what we're saying is that there's still language in statute that says that patients can voluntarily do this.
But
So
some
we
people are
have
gonna
to-
think they have to.
We would love to have that stricken from statute and we would strike it from rule. We don't want patients to register with us. So, but if a patient wants to, they can. Keep in mind, some of this legislation is a throwback to when cannabis was fully illegal, right? So when the only way you could have it is if you were a patient, right? But, so it's antiquated legislation that hasn't been cleaned up and we have to make an account for it in the rule someplace. And so it's there. I will tell you as the director of operations, we don't even have a process in place. If a patient came in today and said, I want to register as a patient, we don't have a form for that. We don't have a registry placed in our computer database for it. But we literally stand around in a huddle and scratch our heads and say, what do we do now? So, I mean, I'm sorry that it's garnered so much negative attention and concern, and I can appreciate why it would. But that's not what we're about. And, we would love to support a change in statute that strikes that entirely. Just doesn't need it.
And if I can add to that, Mary, to Vern's point about the office not wanting to have a patient registry system, we have communicated to the legislature that because that is statutory, we can't remove it as an agency. The legislature has to, and we have communicated to them that in any future overhaul of a medical statute, that is something that really needs to be removed.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your time, Mary.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up and giving us a chance to talk about it. Seriously.
Can I ask a question? I'm a nurse practitioner. I can speak a little bit to the concerns about some of the health questions. I'm neutral, and if you give me an opportunity at some point soon, I think
Absolutely.
it'll help resolve a bit of angst.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Next up, Susan Meehan. Remember to introduce by name and any additional information you're comfortable with.
Thank you.
My name is Susan Meehan. I am the president of the Maine Cannabis Union and a board member of the Maine Cannabis Coalition. And I am here today to speak in opposition to the proposed rule primarily. Please accept this summary and along with our extended analysis of this rule as our testimony on behalf of the union and which is organized as an affiliate of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers and the Maine Cannabis Coalition, an educational organization supporting thousands of patients and medical cannabis businesses here in Maine. I bullet listed this to make it easier, and I will be providing OCP with the actual page numbers that each bullet comes from. Part of the problem I saw is that OCP has 30 days to act upon a complete application per Title II, Chapter 558C, Subchapter 2425A. And this applies to all applications. Throughout the proposed rule, OCP refers to timely filed with no regard of the provisions provided in this section. Telehealth, I found the last conversation interesting because telehealth is not mentioned in the proposed rule, which I found extraordinary because telehealth was just codified in the chapter during the previous year's session. So I find it interesting that we have left a part of the patient requirements in the rule, claiming that we can't take it out of the rule because it's in statute. However, we didn't put any mention of telehealth and patients' access. We went so far in the Telehealth Act as to make sure that we defined a synchronous visit and not a asynchronous visit. So you can't just email a doctor. And my personal experience with this is not in my testimony, but I feel it's pertinent in that in getting my patient certification last year, the last time I got it for this year, I decided I should try the least expensive possible telehealth system in the state to kind of analyze whether or not it actually was a reasonable medical interview. And I found that this very inexpensive $29 certification was amazing. I called, I got an appointment. The practitioner called me back at set appointment time. She asked all the right questions. I have a history as an EMT. She asked all about allergies, previous treatments, what I've used that worked, what I've used that didn't work. She got a good medical history from me, made sure that any medications that I take outside of cannabis were compatible. I found it extraordinary. And I had a digital image of my card in minutes after that appointment. And then I received my card, my physical card in the mail. So I also, continuing on my bullet list here, regarding doctors again, there's an extensive list in the proposed rule about patient record. This isn't OTP's. So doctors will work with their medical examining boards to decide what needs to be in a patient record or what comprises a patient record. I think it's really stepping outside of OCP's scope and lane. OCP's reference to compliance with federal law in several areas of the proposed rule is problematic. The entire program is contrary to federal law. Patient confidentiality would be compromised by these proposed rules. Names and identifying information such as date of birth and addresses are confidential. This hearing is also opposed to patient confidentiality. Please, if you're a patient and don't feel comfortable stating your name and the town you're from, I hope that OCP would accept that. So several areas of this rule disregard that. The patient inspections, the department may not conduct inspections of a qualifying patient or a caregiver operating under subchapter 23A. And OCP makes several references in the proposed rule to potential patient inspections regarding electrical code and fencing. Revocation, the language in this pages 73 to 75, the sweeping language of but not limited to, I understand it as someone who's helped write and analyze and research legislation. However, I believe that but are not limited to needs to be struck. OCP isn't always friendly with their inspections, and they're not always, it seems like, and maybe the perception is wrong, but it seems like they are not out to help you into compliance, but sometimes out to help you out of business. So I also would like to know, and I'm serious about this, I really want to know, how does one objectively quantify marketing to those under the age of 21? I know it's in the law, I know it's in the rule. Give me a list. How do I objectively decide if what I'm doing is marketing to those under the age of 21? The rules indicate on page 80 that an appellate may only bring an attorney. The language restricts an appellate, allowing no industry expert, no witness, no employee, etc. We do not agree with such limitation and oppose this. Pediatric qualifying patients, the proposed rule does not align with the act. There were some significant changes made to pediatric licensing over the past 2 years, redefining parental rights. The rule needs to mirror the language provided in the act on subchapter 2423B. Municipal authorization. Municipal authorization is not required of a patient or a caregiver without a storefront in the town.
Susan, I'm gonna back you there, or not, yeah, a little over 5. We do have your written comments.
So I written it, and I would be happy to answer any questions here or via email or whatever.
Thank you.
Can I give her my time, please? I think she makes a better point than I can. Now.
It's not your-
I represent Sally on the coalition.
All right, thank you, Susan. As I had noted, our colleague Lisa Roberts has come in. I'm going to have her introduce herself before we move on to the next person.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Roberts. I'm the Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives. So I oversee the communications, stakeholder engagement, as well as policy, special projects and data teams.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up, Scott Ouellette.
Basically what I'm just gonna come up and just, basically say that, my name's Scott Ouellette, I'm a registered caregiver, and, I'm tired of coming back here for these bullshit rules. Those are my submitted testimony.
Thank you, Scott. The next one. Gosh, I cannot. This, sorry. It might be Lori Maines.
Yeah.
Okay.
Coming out of my shell, I usually do this. Good morning, Office of Cannabis Policy. My name is Lori Maines and I'm from Western Maine. I've been a patient in Maine's use of cannabis medical program for over 10 years. I find this nearly annual process of hearing about the regulatory agency attacking patient rights, caregiver, dispensary businesses, and in general bad mouthing the industry has allowed their agency to even exist is exhausting. It is exhausting. Using patient reps where available. I recently traveled to the East Coast visiting family and have experienced cannabis from Florida to Maine. I prefer my Maine local caregivers where I'm confident in the quality and consistency of my medicine. My caregivers answer my questions and help me find products that meet my needs and are within my retirement income budget. I also have an outdoor harvest once a year and have well-maintained fence, and I have no experience of thefts ever, so my fencing and locks seem adequate to me. The context of this proposed rule that disturbed me are the implications that patient homes could be inspected for fencing and electrical code compliance in a grow room or fence in an outdoor cultivation area. Not only a complete evasion of privacy, this is against the law, specifically Title 22, Chapter 558C. D. The department may not conduct inspect of a qualified patient or caregiver operating under Section 2423-A, subsection 3, paragraph C. It is interesting to me that there are 2 lines of attack here, one upon patient indoor grows and one upon patient outdoor grows. So in these 2 accounts, they attack a patient's ability to grow their own medicine. In their prolonged approach, OCP is also attempting to attack access to my medical program, trying to educate doctors as to what constitutes a patient record. My healthcare provider will manage my record and OCP can stay out of my record. OCP also wants to decide if my doctor and I have a bona fide relationship. And thirdly, OCP has acted like telehealth is not even explicitly and specifically coded in Chapter 558C as it is omitted from their proposed rule. On all these counts, I state that my healthcare is my business and will not tolerate loss of access to medicine by red tape, slanted OCP sponsored news stories on new fences. My generation also had to hide in the back alley years ago, and I will not be driven to the illicit market where we don't worry about mold or even pesticides. But then we have to worry that is it fentanyl laced batch that will kill me instantly? As a patient who depends on this program, I feel less safe every time OCP starts rulemaking. The Office of Cannabis Policy may have outgrown its uselessness, unlike my cannabis fencing. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Up next is Mark Barnett. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Mark Barnett. I'm a resident of Auburn. I'm the policy director of the Maine Craft Cannabis Association and the owner of Higher Grounds of Maine, a caregiver retail store in Portland. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here today. I'll echo the concerns that it's 2023, remote testimony should probably be an automatic component in policymaking, especially regarding one of our state's largest industries. Just for the folks who are going to follow, as far as the bureaucracy goes, if you don't mention that you're a patient and you're concerned about confidentiality, that's okay. Your comments will still be referenced, especially if you refer to the specific section of the rule that you're concerned with. We are here today in opposition to the proposals, despite some welcome updates from recent legislation. Some of the frustrations you're hearing just reflect things that I think we wish we had seen in the rule. But we will submit detailed feedback on the individual points of this proposed rule. My comments today will focus on a few key areas that highlight, again, a little bit of a disconnect that we see between the office and the people that it is funded by, the businesses, the employees, the patients, the people of Maine. Again, these rules are sharpening in some ways weapons that we don't in all cases believe exist in state law. And a lot of them could be used to push Mainers out of this industry and to push Maine patients out of a program that has served them incredibly well for many years with no problems. It's a hammer looking for a nail in some cases, and I understand some of these are matters of interpretation, but we are going to continue to dispute those areas. Some of the concerns are obvious in removing explicit protections for telehealth appointments in Section 4. But frankly, the requirements for security in Section 3(2)A and B, both for home and for business grows. It hasn't come up yet, but I did want to call attention to the fines and the relationship to how we define major violations, both affecting public safety and just major violations. Altogether, these would be incredibly punitive for caregiver businesses. Most businesses can't afford that level of fine for something like growing a couple of extra plants, when other registrants in the program have literally an unlimited canopy. Clearly, that is not a major violation of the Act. Or having too short of a fence, again, in Section 10. In the interest of time and knowing there's a lot of folks who still want to speak, I would speak to some other concerns that are less obvious and seem very nebulous, and we would like a lot of clarity and maybe some extra language on those. Like the definition of a registered caregiver that's supplied on page 22. As a registered caregiver myself and representing many caregivers, I can't help but to see that as limiting the ability of caregivers to be, quote, organized as any type of legal business entity recognized under the laws of the state, which is provided in statute in Section 2423A2. If you combine that with the proposed authorized conduct of a thus defined registered caregiver versus the dispensaries, it does seem to fundamentally disrupt the hundreds of caregiver businesses that provide the majority of legal cannabis in the state. It doesn't seem to help, putting the caregiver versus dispensary definition. This rule doesn't remove any of the obstacles or most of the obstacles to accessing a dispensary license, like having to require on-site parking spaces, which was an archaic rule designed to shrink available real estate for folks applying for dispensary licenses. We do appreciate lowering the expense of that license. That is definitely a big help for folks who are pursuing that, but that's not worth the trade-off for most people who can't access a dispensary license no matter the cost. I just want to say, and I do think that this rule is an improvement over the last round that we had proposed, but cracking down on practices doesn't really feel like the role of a taxpayer-funded civil agency when there really is no significant public safety harm or damage that's been reported or presented. Most regulatory bodies do not function this way. These changes overall just are new obstacles to doing business. There are new obstacles to obtaining state legal cannabis products. Our advocates have repeatedly sat down with the OCP. We'd love to do so again to discuss a collaborative approach to ensuring the success of our programs. And again, we've had successes that we do sincerely appreciate, and we would like to continue with that. Thank you. Elements of this proposed rule do seem like a step backwards, but we look forward to engaging with this office in a constructive way during the upcoming legislative sessions and into the future. We just need to know the office intends to honor that. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. All right. My apologies for probably butchering this next last name. Stephen Michelotti.
Steve Michelotti.
Michelotti. There we go.
Hey, doing Steve Michelotti of Glenburn, Maine. I have the smallest dispensary in the world in Kenduskeag, Maine. We are 41.5 square feet. We are opposed against these laws. Our biggest issue to start is section 3, 2A1, the fencing. Needing a commercial and security grade fence, and we already have a fence for our property, is just overburdensome and expensive for us to go and reinstall it. We paid $10,000 for our last fence, and it's not going to be, I think, sufficient for a commercial or security grade fence. So I'm thinking it's going to cost me an extra 20 grand for another fence next year. So we don't like that. The commercial grade locks and enclosed to our facility, and that seems like an overreach for you guys as well. We have been robbed. We've been robbed by, sorry, give me a minute here. We've been robbed by our workers. I had a worker last year take 10 pounds from me, go make a delivery. He made the delivery. He got the $20,000, came back. He did not return with the money. I called that dispensary owner. He has the paperwork. That delivery was there. I called the police. I called you guys. Nothing happens. I'm just out 20 grand. So that seems unnecessary. The police said I can bring it to small claims court, and that's $6,000, and nothing's happened. I'm just out 20 G's. What else here? Video surveillance. That seemed like a massive overreach here, because now we're required to keep 14 days of surveillance. I don't know about you, but most of us know when I've been robbed. You guys know when you've been robbed? I know the day of. I take that security footage and I've got it. I know who robbed me. I know what happened. And nothing happens. You don't get, the state police doesn't do anything. Local sheriffs don't do anything. You're just out money, and it sucks. We also had an issue with the increase in label size that was section. I'm sorry, I printed out all your laws here as I read through them and highlighted them. We found them as mostly a massive overreach. Another big law, we saw that it was going to now in the locks, it's meant to prevent theft versus discourage. So now am I liable when somebody steals $20,000 worth of product? So like I'm at fault and I've been robbed? That's crazy. That's crazy. You know, I'm the smallest store in the world. I'm just trying to stay alive, and you guys are trying to kill me. Every 2 years, it feels like I'm fighting these laws that are just burdensome and crazy. And they're not written by small guys like me. They're written by big adult use compliance guys. Maybe you guys got the money to fund it. I don't. You know, it's me, my wife, and the 2 other guys I got working for me, struggling every day to survive. Because this market's super competitive, as you guys know. Prices are dropping, electrical rates are skyrocketing. It's not fair. What you guys are doing us isn't fair. And that's all I got today. I'm going to go harvest. That's what I'm supposed to be doing.
I appreciate your help, someplace to go, but I would like to just clarify a couple of things for you. So if you're a new dispensary operator, you were recently inspected.
I've been inspected several times.
Right. So if your fence passed last year, it's going to pass again. The requirement, when we said change it to commercial grade, we're talking about getting away from people putting in livestock fences, electric
My fence
fences.
is a livestock fence. I've just adapted it. So it's just going to be passed for that time until
If
the
it's
next
secure
inspector
enough,
gets it back.
if it was secure enough last year, it should be secure enough now. And if you have questions.
Should.
Can you let me finish, please? If you'd like, we can send somebody out to check it and let you know if it works.
I was inspected last Monday, actually, so I'm all set with that.
All right. The other thing you mentioned was around video surveillance
Yeah.
at 14 days. So that's not new. That's in the current rule
In the current rule for our stores, because I
for dispensaries.
for dispensaries, not caregivers. So that would be for
But you
me.
said you're a dispensary.
I'm a caregiver storefront, sorry.
Okay, well then you don't, then you're not
That-
obligated.
Doesn't that apply for me?
Stores are now, right?
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah,
they're
we would
asking.
add that requirement to stores.
Yeah.
The one thing that I'll say, you said, and I got a big chuckle, you know, I think I know when I've been robbed. You know, when you've been robbed, if somebody comes in and points a gun at you, what you may not know is that the employee that stole 10 pounds could also be taking a pound a week from you.
You
And
know,
out the back door.
I've
and you
noticed
don't know.
that. I've called them, but I've watched my cameras. That's
So-
my job.
Right, so cameras do serve another benefit, but my responses are tempered because you clarified that you're not a dispensary. So thank you for that.
Have a good day.
I'll just remind members of the audience, if you're not currently testifying, please restrain from making comments. The next individual to testify, Amy McFarland. Is Amy in the room? Okay.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen of the Office of Cannabis Policy. My name is Amy McFarland, medical cannabis patient and farmer. I was the co-director of Liberate Maine Cannabis, the grassroots political action committee. Today, I'm submitting testimony against the proposed medical rules, as many items presented within these pages need correction. For instance, in page 22, a registered caregiver is defined as a natural person who is registered by the department pursuant MRS 2425A. A registered dispensary is defined as an individual or business entity. Also listed within the registered dispensary's definition is authorized conduct. A registered dispensary is authorized to acquire, possess, cultivate, manufacture, deliver, transfer, transport, sell, and supply harvested cannabis and cannabis plants to patients and caregivers. This authorized conduct was omitted from the definition of registered caregiver and as the allowance for a caregiver to be an LLC or C Corp. Next, we have the fencing issue. Requiring patients to install costly commercial or security grade fencing along with a commercial grade lock is overstepping the department's authority. Maine residents over the age of 21 growing for personal use do not have these requirements. Now, as far as testing, majority of us know the lab's not 100% accurate. We've heard that at least there's a 20% discrepancy. This needs to be taken into account when samples are being collected. Stating a medical provider shall facilitate an encounter with a person and conduct relevant physical examination occurring at a permanent location that is clinically appropriate for medical services may limit a medical provider from performing their duties. By statute, telehealth is allowed. Lastly, the violations. How does one engage in marketing or advertising of cannabis to individuals under the age of 21 or individuals who are not qualifying patients? This is too vague, and this is considered a major violation. As a caregiver, I can't make claims about health or physical benefits for medical cannabis, yet I grow medical cannabis. If I do make a claim of any health benefits, it is considered a major violation. With that said, why my testimony?
Thank you, Amy.
Would you like a copy of this? Thank you.
All right, up next is Kyle Abbott. I think we're gonna do a couple more. Then I'm going to switch to neither for nor against.
Mine might be in the neither for or against, but it should be in opposed.
Okay,
I circled the wrong one.
no worries.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kyle.
My name is Kyle from Lincoln, Old Moose Farms. I'd first like to say thank you for the opportunity to participate in this program. I moved from Pennsylvania 7 seasons ago to help a friend of mine from high school who lives in New England with epilepsy. I paid the fees. I've jumped through the hoops. I've followed the laws to a T. Even in following some of those laws where I was allowed as a caregiver to have an office and to dispense cannabis from that office, I did that. The field investigator was at my house the day I got my paperwork. So I hadn't even had a grow set up yet. So it was perfect. He could show up and tell me what I could and couldn't do. I asked about the fencing then. And I had 4-foot animal fencing just to keep my critters out of my garden, my vegetable garden. And he said, look, you're almost there. Another 2 feet and that'll be acceptable for your cannabis garden you want to put in here. Fantastic, I thought. No, that stuff's not that expensive. Moving along, I set up this little shop, my office. A couple of days later, the field investigators just happened to stop by. They didn't even know there was a store there, even though I put in my paperwork to change of address for this office. There's 12 investigators. I had this office
for a couple of days. They showed up and told me that I'm in violation. I have hours posted. I'm a caregiver storefront. This is, I'm operating as a storefront, not an office. Okay, great. Go through that. But in the 7 months, I had this caregiver storefront. I saw 3 different investigators. They came in and never asked to see any of my paperwork. They never asked to see my grow. They never asked to inspect anything. They sat across from me like you do now and grilled me about other retailers in the area. They asked about my practices and what I thought about other companies coming into the area. One guy came in a couple of days later and joked about being able to, we've got a bet going on if we could find anything wrong with this place. Ha ha ha. I don't appreciate that kind of banter. I'm a legal business man. I pay the fees, I do what I have to do, and I get this good cop, bad cop thing. When 2 of them come in and sit down and ask me questions. I don't feel like that's the way, it's not a compliance check at that point. You haven't asked me to see anything. I don't get out of the woods often because I'm trying, like many of these people, to keep my business afloat. The numbers are going down and the cost is going up. For me to take this fencing that I did have, I put in the fencing that they asked for. Now I'm going to have to change it. He said chain link. It's got to be this chain link commercial fence, commercial locks. Mine's not in plain view. If you come across my culvert, you're on my prop. That's trespassing right there. You cannot see any of my herb unless you fly over my house. You have 100 yards of driveway to come up. Good luck getting past the smell of my cat. He'll know you're there and he's going to meow. He's going to say, hey, I got guard cat. It's a weird thing, but it does way better than a fence. I've got friends that have fencing. I've got friends that have the greenhouses. He said it was okay for me to put in a greenhouse as long as it had a locked door on it. How's that plastic going to keep somebody out? It's not, but because of the way the rules are written, it's okay and acceptable for me not to put a fence around this greenhouse. I've had friends that have been robbed with plastic greenhouses. Fencing, people can climb fences. I don't want to put heavy metal fencing in my property. I don't want metal in my ground. That's going to eventually cause me to fail for heavy metals in my soil and in my products. To the testing, I know it wasn't really addressed or anything to change, but it's in the air that we're going to have to start doing testing like adult use. I can't afford that. I can't afford the fence. It's hard enough for a person like me to come up and just try to do better and to help. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you letting me come and speak and listening to my words. But I don't feel like it should be like this. We're here to help people. We're here to change people's lives for the better. Okay. So coming in and writing new rules and changing things up and making it more expensive for a broke guy like me to try to produce top quality medicine for people. I feel like you guys are just kind of like pushing the little guy around. I can't afford it. So try to work with us as opposed to against us. Don't give us a short amount of time and please get this Zoom thing figured out. I got a lot of patients up there that have a lot to say, but they're bedridden, they're sick, they're dying of cancer. Or they seize up in public and they're embarrassed to come out here. Those people's voice need to be heard too. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. A reminder that any individual unable to attend the public hearing can submit written comments until October 10th. And those written comments are weighted just as much as individuals appearing today. And in addition to that, individuals testifying today are also able to submit additional written comments in addition to their spoken comments today.
Excuse me,
Yes.
maybe submit recorded comments. Some of them don't write well.
Sure.
Or they-
Yeah, that's perfectly acceptable. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Rhonda Willett, I believe.
Oh, I wasn't gonna speak.
Oh, okay, that's fine. No worries.
Say I was going.
No, it was on the testimony registration form. So just wanted to give you that option. I think we have 3 more to go through in the first tranche of forms we got, and we're approaching 11 o'clock. I'd like to get through these three before we do our first break. So next, I have Jeffrey Thorne.
Morning.
Morning, Jeffrey.
It's my first time up here, so I've been working in the medical field for a while. I'm Jeff Thorne. I live in Farmingdale. I work for the Frost Factory. Successful medical dispensary, Hollowell. Basically, there's two things I kind of wanted to point out that I feel have been highlighted here. The telemedicine benefits. I mean, if the Zoom comments alone don't point that out. Maine has an internet problem. A lot of people are disabled. They don't have the ability to get out there. We have people, I mean, multiple times a week that will talk about how easy it is in Maine to get a card. And it's not this blasé, oh, I get to get a card, ha, 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 type thing. It's, man, they really respect the fact that we have to get this medicine, especially with the opioid crisis going on right now. We're losing record numbers of people. Transportation costs are going up. It's hard to drive if people would have to meet. So I think it's really important to highlight the telemedicine benefits and keep that in mind. I mean, on the medical side alone, the lab testing, we have people that travel so far once a month from New Jersey. They'll save money driving all that way, buying 2.5 ounces and driving all the way back. It's not just a benefit to us. It's not just a benefit to the community. It's a benefit to all these businesses that are along the way that these people shop at, they stop at hotels. They're law-abiding citizens who aren't going out there. There are people that are trying to do the dirty stuff. I have submitted several complaints to you guys, never heard a thing. So that's something you guys really got to work on. We're willing to work with you guys. I don't like the fact that I get to hear people come in and talk about blazingly breaking the law when I'm supposed to report you like immediately if you do that stuff. And if I do, nobody even responds. That's just one thing. Back to the labs. They have a track record everywhere. In every state that labs open up and mandatory testing goes, where they're either caught in a conflict of interest, they're caught fudging numbers, they're caught passing moldy suspect weed. And it's usually for bigger product, bigger monetary gain. The problem with that is it costs so much money to get into the lab game that these people need to get their money back faster. So forcing the medical program to go through that, medical program not opposed to lab testing. That's a great idea. It's something we're going to get in there, but we need to lower the cost of it. There has to be a better way than just batch testing of one giant grow. You should be able to come into a store, pick out a couple things, bring it back to the lab, test it, get the results back out. It would be easier that way in our mind. Let me see. Basically, other than and I'll submit written testimony on the statutes that I'm pointing out specifically. I didn't really know to do that the first time I said. But painting us all in these recent news stories and comments is something that really the reason I wanted to come out here, because I sold weed illegally for 15 years. I never saw the amount of corruption that I kind of see now. I'm legit. I had a mole in the DA that would show us photos when we were being surveilled. I had police officers that would help me, let me know when I was being looked at. It's a different game now. I wanted to do this right because it's a future where a lot of us who don't have any other type of skills have a real masterful degree with this plan. I can't grow for shit. I'll tell you right now, sorry my language, I can't grow at all. But I have an ability to take somebody who comes to me and tells me they're in some type of pain. And just from my personal experience, I can suggest something. Suggest it. Not this doctor, oh, I know, blah, 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 blah. We just want to make that easier. We want to make sure the rules, and again, I'll submit all the statutes I'm pointing out. I just want to make sure that that's highlighted, how important that is, that we're able to make this easier for people in the legal sense with the cost of everything going up. That's really all I had.
Sure. Jeff, I'll comment on one item that you mentioned about complaints that come in.
Yep.
We take those really seriously. Let me explain a little bit why you don't end up hearing back from us.
Yes.
The confidentiality protections that exist in statute within the medical program would prevent us from communicating to you the findings of an internal investigation.
Right.
But like I said, Byrne and his team take all of those complaints that come in really
Right.
seriously. I would love to be able to reach out to you and say, hey, thank you for communicating. This is what we ended up finding out.
Yep.
If the confidentiality provisions go away,
Yep.
you can bet you're going to be hearing responses from us. But I just
Right.
wanted to explain why that disconnect, which I appreciate, must seem very frustrating.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
happening.
especially when the reports come out, because it's like, nobody wants to be selling moldy weed. Like, we're doing successful. We're not here trying to push anything to get any extra money. So it's like, I feel like you guys really, there's a moment right now where we could work with each other. Maine is so revered for this medical program. There are people across the country, dude. I have best friends that live in Pennsylvania, California, and Florida. They think I'm lying when I tell them the quality we're getting at the price. They literally don't believe me. Like, we just got to keep that in mind. This is a lot of tax revenue coming in that not only is going to help, we're getting money, we're living our lives. This tax revenue can help schools, bridges, it can help feed people, it can help clean areas. It's a moment I just hope you take account. Just let us help you, help us.
Thank you, Jack.
No problem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have two more left before our first break. Julie Milliken. Sir. Are you Jacob? No. Okay, you'll be next.
Good morning, I'm Julie Milliken. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I live in Monmouth and I have an office practice in Augusta. I'm also a board member of the Medical Marijuana Caregivers of Maine Trade Association. And I'm the owner of Maine Medical Certifications, which is a medical card issuing service. And so I want to thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to address some of the concerns that we have with the rules. And there's some confusion. There's a lot of confusion. I've gotten 100 calls in the last couple of weeks from caregivers and patients that are concerned about the telehealth option. And so have been able to explain to them that telehealth provisions exist in statute and aren't being changed by these regulations or by these updated rules. However, the rules as written that carry over that are unchanged were written before telehealth was approved. And some of them are in conflict with basic telehealth standards. So we just need to add a little bit of language in there to maybe make it more clear to the patients and the providers so that we're all making sure we're in compliance and doing things right. So on pages 30 of the document, the 62F bona fide medical provider patient relationship says that the medical provider shall certify a written certification has been provided in the course of a bona fide medical provider patient relationship. The medical provider may have to verify that prior to issuance of the certification, the bona fide provider patient relationship exists. And in order to establish this bona fide medical provider patient relationship, the medical provider shall, we should add some language at the end of that paragraph that says either in person or via telemedicine. That way that it is clear, all of the subsequent paragraphs that describe what the relationship needs to be and what the provider needs to do on a clinical level are clear that it can be done either in person or via telemedicine. So A1 says conduct a full assessment of the patient's medical history, including substance misuse history and current condition, medication and treatment. The second line says facilitate an encounter with the person and conduct a relevant physical examination occurring at a permanent location, similar to a covered office visit or outpatient treatment in terms of site, extent, duration, and frequency. So that's sort of in conflict with telemedicine if you're requiring that it be done in an office building. So we need to just kind of say, or via telemedicine in those paragraphs. And it says that it has to be a place that enables the patient to return for follow-up consultation or assistance as appropriate. We should add the words as appropriate. Again, via telemedicine, we live in a very rural state. We need to make sure that we don't limit patient access to care with the language in the rules being in conflict with telemedicine standards. Section C3 says that the provider should review prior records of relevant examinations, diagnostic test results, and treatment responses. And we should add the words as applicable. That's not always necessary, There may be times when we really need to dig deep, and there are other times when we already have that information or it's not relevant for that patient. It should be at the discretion of the clinician. So if we add the words as applicable, that sort of solves that problem. Moving down a little further, under E2, it says results of the physical examination, including vital signs and any laboratory tests, need to be in the patient record. Again, that should say as applicable. We don't necessarily need a set of vital signs on everybody, and it's not able to be obtained via telemedicine. If it's a patient who requires vital signs or laboratory investigation, those would be a patient that we wouldn't treat with telemedicine. We would bring them into the office. So as applicable would solve the conflict in that sentence. Same thing with number 4 under that same section, E4, a description of the treatment provided to the patient, including all past and current medications prescribed or administered, is very, very difficult for any to meet in any healthcare setting. No patient knows all medications that were ever prescribed to them. So if we can write any relevant and current medications, or write the words as applicable, or even better, strike that from the rules, that would solve a conflict there and being able to comply with the rules. And then number 6 under that same section requires notes on evaluations, communications, and consultations with other medical providers. That should say as applicable. We don't always need communication or consultations with specialists for this medical treatment. And so if this section could be updated to make it more clear that it complies with telemedicine, that would be terrific. Even better would be to strike all of those criteria under that section completely. They sort of describe clinical decision-making that doesn't need to be dictated and ruled for medical providers. It should be left to the clinical expertise of the medical provider to determine what investigations and assessments and physical examinations need to occur with their patient, and leave the medical decision between the patient and the providers, and not based on rules. This is not all inclusive. There are some things that we would probably include in our documentation and our assessments that you haven't put in the rules, and there are things in the rules that we may not decide to put in that specific patient encounter. And the only other question that I had, or something that I would like you to take a look at, is on page 29, under authorized conduct by medical provider, section A, and then 1 small a, there's language that says certification for minor qualifying patients, which is crossed out. It says when a list of physicians known to the department to be willing to act as a consulting physician for the pediatric patient is not available, the department will permit the inquiring treating medical provider to proceed with the certification. Is that crossed out because we're no longer going to allow that? Or is there some other place where that's been readdressed? As far as I know, the list of qualifying or physicians known to the department willing to act as consulting physician does not exist. There are 0 in the state physicians willing to consult for pediatric patients. So there are a few of us that are certified for pediatrics who are willing to do pediatric certifications independently for our own patients. So I don't know why that's crossed out, or if that's addressed somewhere in statute that I'm not aware of, but I just need to make sure that pediatric qualifying patients do still have access to healthcare and certification.
Yeah, I can respond to that. So the requirement for a second opinion for pediatric patients was eliminated from statute a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And so there is no list maintained, and minor qualifying patients are still eligible for.
So we don't need to worry about it being a rule because it exists in statute.
Yeah.
Perfect. Good.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Good. No questions for me.
We're good. All right, last before our break, Jacob Glidden.
Hello, I am Jacob Lynn. I'm here with the Cross Factory. I have a statement for you. Since the very inception of telemedicine to our cannabis program, we have heard nothing but happiness from our patients when they find out their card is about to expire. The simple reason for this is unlike other states. Maine, with its ritual outspread population, is known for the ease at which one can acquire a medical certification for cannabis. The benefits of this are exponential. Not only does this cut transportation costs for people in a time of high gas costs, but it also has taken the unnecessary drama of having to drive to an area that might not be necessarily familiar to someone. Seeing As a lot of Maine's cannabis patients are of the older population, eliminating telemedicine would put up extra barriers for those citizens to acquire relief for what has ailed them. Being a cannabis dispensary employee in the medical field, this is truly my main goal. Finding any legal way we can help. I can't speak for any of the other propositions today, but I felt I had to make it clear. Eliminating the ability for one to use telemedicine to get a cannabis certification would be detrimental to the medical programs. Our current ease at the legitimate ways to get a card in Maine is seen as a beacon of light to the medical community nationwide. This committee should know that, and the OCP should also celebrate it rather than continue to push draconian ideas that will push these people out of the medical and into recreational, where the only data point that is considered is not the overall health of the patient, but rather the bottom lines of those who hold the purse strings. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Jacob. All right, we're going to take about a 5-minute break. This will allow people to have a bio break if you need, and to cycle from this room to overflow rooms if you want to continue to view the live stream, to allow people in those rooms who have yet to testify to make their way. So we'll be back
11:20.
11:20, yeah. restart the hearing post break. As I did in the previous, the earlier session of this hearing. I have a stack of registration forms. I'm going to call people in order, and then at the end of that, make sure that there's not someone who forgot to fill out a form who wants to testify. Just as a little bit of housekeeping, I believe I counted 14 forms we have left, which will take us right to around, I would say, 12:30. If that is everyone at 12:30, we'll adjourn. If there are several more people who want to testify who don't have a form, we might break for lunch and then come back. But I'm going to try to be as respectful of people's time as possible. Next up, Danielle Gemfner. And as a reminder for participants in the room who might have just arrived or were in the overflow rooms, if you could state your name and whatever identifying information you are comfortable with or not, that's perfectly acceptable. It's important for us to have your name so that if we do have to get back to you with a question, sorry, an answer to your question, we're able to do so. Floor is yours, Danielle.
All right, my name is Danielle Gensner. I'm manager of 420 Pharma in Mechanic Falls, Maine. I live in Minot. I'm also a patient, medical cannabis patient for 3 years now. I just wanted to touch base real quick on something that everybody else pretty much has had, which is ignoring the telehealth and the new rule. Why is it so important? As we work with Julie Milligan, that's actually the nurse practitioner that we work through, and she gives great information and advice to the qualifying patients. She has even turned people away that she didn't see fit for that. I've had to check with parents because they were 18 years old, lived at home, and she wanted to make sure they had a safe place to use their cannabis that was legal, and required more information from patients before giving them the card, requiring a list of medications to make sure they weren't going to be too drowsy. If they were taking any blood pressure medication, make sure it wasn't too close to the regular. She does a really good job, in my opinion, and I think that the rule should reflect the statute. It does feel like it was completely ignored in the fact that a lot of other things that we talked about, something about how patients didn't have to register and that they just didn't, you don't have a list for it. That's just something they haven't removed from the rule, and yet we completely forgot about telehealth. Half the industry, if not 2/3 of the industry, if not 3/4 of the industry. It's not covered by health insurance. It isn't federally legal. So doing a doctor's appointment is out of the question. It's going to cost more, and it's going to drive them to recreational, which is not the dose that they might need. Higher doses for medical patients is very important. With the adult use rule, a lot of things holding that back for actual medical. Can't think of the word when you're up here, but it's there. Anyway, also the fencing thing as well. I understand, and of course, being a dispensary, we should have a fence. We should have commercial fence. I agree. Patients should not have a commercial fence. Just keep people out of there, and try to keep it out of view. Makes sense to me, but requiring a patient to have commercial fence seems ridiculous. But besides that, I know we talked about testing and that how we all expect that to be a requirement in the future. We actually, as 420 Pharma, test our flower. We send it out for testing, and we've used a couple different companies. We've taken samples right next to each other, sent them to 2 different companies, and gotten completely different readings. So I don't know if testing is exactly what, once we get it required, we need to make sure that they're actually following what they should be doing in the testing, because getting completely 2 different readings from same samples is ridiculous. But that it's only for the future. I know we're not talking about that in this rule right now, but we all know it's coming. So yes, please protect the telehealth. Please put that in there. I think it's probably the #1 concern of 420 Pharma. Also, we're part of the Oxford Hills Chamber of Commerce, even though we're in Mechanic Falls, it's not part of Oxford Hills. But I know that medical cannabis has been a staple in that county, and is needed by a lot of people, because even our medical store, we have all of our people are over 55. Patients are 55 plus. These aren't kids just looking to get high. These are actual cannabis patients that need it. So just put that telehealth in there and let's clear that up. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle. All right, next up I have Dawson Julia. You in the room, Dawson? Okay, I'll set him aside. For now, if we'll do a last call at the end if he doesn't come in. If I see him come in, I'll jump to him after the person who is currently testifying. Next up, Derek Shirley.
Actually signed up a little late, so I wasn't expecting to be right now. How you guys doing today? Good. Let me get my notes out of here. All right, first off, good start. I'm going to start off with a quote. Any law that's made by man that doesn't fit circumstances of reality will be violated. So with that being said, I think that's exactly what we have here. No matter what rules you make, if you have all these people in multiple rooms that think they're ridiculous, you're not going to have people following your rules. And what are you going to do about that? You're going to try to force major violations, right? Just like the rules say. You're going to put in the major violations. So then what does the major violations do? Are they going to so all these people are going to just stop growing after you revoke their license? Are they just going to stop? No. They're going to the traditional market, right? Because if you're going to take someone's livelihood away, and there's still a whole other market out there that exists, I'll be more than happy to. Everyone on this board is responsible for creating an illicit market. Plain and simple. So just remember, any law that is made by man that doesn't fit the circumstances of reality will be violated. To show your disconnect, you guys did not allow Zoom for this meeting, and I think you realize that was probably a mistake, but you might be happy about it. Who really knows? But there's not even bathrooms on this floor.
There are bathrooms.
Sorry, I was told there wasn't, so I redact that. So there's bathrooms on this floor. I'm glad people can use the bathroom the best way because I was sent to the second floor when I asked where the bathroom was. So, given all the public information of, frankly, of involvement of the private sector in the main government, how I personally find it hard to trust any of you making these rules. I mean, we've had the director of policy here for many years writing the same rules that have been denied by legislators year after year after year. And it's getting really, really tiring. And that's why you're going to keep seeing people showing up. And again, I go back to any law created by man doesn't fit the reality of the circumstances will be violated. So any laws you create that creates a larger illicit market is on you. And any bad things that happen is going to be on you because you're trying to force these terrible rules. And that's dangerous. So really the question is, how can we trust you when we already know you're privatized sectors? You have privatized sectors and now you have ties with the state. We know this. You are a co-founder. And now you get to rewrite our rules. Does that benefit your own agenda, the state's agenda, or the people's agenda? Whose agenda do you fit? Because it's not the people. It's clear as day. That's why we have 1 million people showing up. So again, I remind you, any law made by man does not, if it doesn't fit the circumstances, it's going to be violated. I'll keep saying it because you clearly aren't getting it. Even if change the director, we're still here complaining about the same thing. If you want to know why I'm insane online, this is why. Because I'm here now for a third time in multiple years, fighting about the same thing, testing, blah, 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 blah. The same, now fencing again. I love the fencing battle. I love dealing with fences. Meanwhile, most of these places that have their ordinance, because I am I love that. The zoning board, I'm a zoning board member in my town. Some towns I know don't even allow 6+ foot fences. So by design, your rules are putting basically patients that can't grow, aren't even allowed to grow by their own ordinance in their own town. So what are y'all doing? Being cops is what you're doing. And not being regulators and not being policymakers. We've been here so many years and we're saying the same thing. Are you sick of us? Obviously, some people are, because that's why they put new people in, right? Because all these people have been showing up. I see so many familiar faces here. It's not even funny. Some people don't even like me, and I don't even care. Because the fact of the matter is you guys keep on pushing the agenda. The gig's up. The gig is up. The agendas are over. You're gonna either work with the people, work for the people, or we're just gonna do whatever the hell we want. Because at the end of the day,
30 seconds.
thank you, Gabby. At the end of the day, people, any law made by man that doesn't fit the circumstances of reality will be violated. And that is what we have here today, exactly to a T. And I think you guys really don't understand the reality of the situation from what I explained before. Not letting patients Zoom, you have people missing crops, missing work, just to come here at a 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. That's garbage.
Thank
Get
you.
with the program.
Next up, Dawson Julia. Dawson, sorry, I called you and you're out of the room. And I just wanted to circle back to you.
Hello, my name is Dawson Julia, and I own the first medical cannabis caregiver storefront in Maine. And I did it against the government's consent, and eventually on my third inspection, I was inspected by medical cannabis inspectors, 5 Waldo County Sheriff's trucks, and the director of medical cannabis at the time. Eventually, I was clear of any violations, and I helped others start cannabis caregiver storefronts. And we passed the bill to make it clear caregiver storefronts were allowed amongst unlimited medical dispensaries, caregiver to caregiver sales, allowed unlimited employees, unlimited patients were allowed, and the medical condition list to get certified went away and was replaced by doctor's discretion. Those were the good days. And eventually cannabis caregiver storefronts and medical dispensaries became over 300, and soon cannabis became Maine's biggest tax generating commodity, even bigger than lobster. Today, I am watching the medical industry downsize, and it's very clear some of the downsizing is natural, but a lot of the downsizing is by design. And very evident, OCP's intention is to promote the adult use program, hence the higher sales tax, the higher licensing costs, and the deliberate overregulation of OCP. Perfect example would be these proposed rules. I have too many complaints about these proposed rules to talk about in my verbal testimony, but I will be sure to write as much as possible with my written testimony, and I will encourage others to do the same. If these proposed rules were to pass, making the cost of medical cannabis become very expensive in a time when inflation is rising astronomically fast, and this will affect everyone in medical cannabis industry, from the over 100,000 certified patients, over 4,000 certified employees, and the almost 900 medical certifiers, the almost 2,000 medical cannabis caregivers, and all the sales tax they are generating, and all the personal taxes and license fees they pay. This is a proposal for sudden death of the medical program, and my business may be no more, but my ambition to advocate for medical cannabis seems to only get more intensified when I view the latest tactics OCP proposed rules attempt. This is a department where the director of OCP is appointed by the governor. Although the proposed rules Although the governor may be terming out this next election, her party is not. The damage caused by these proposed rules, if passed as written, will surely do damage to all those mostly registered voters, and the damage caused will certainly cause a backlash in votes for her party. I will make it my personal obligation to express my First Amendment rights to make sure everyone knows where the fault lies if these proposed rules were to become legal rules. I look forward to the public document required from OCP detailing both verbal and written testimonies and witness how OCP will respect or not respect testimonies of mostly certified voters. I also am looking forward to writing my written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Dawson. Next up, Brett Messer.
Morning, Director Hudak and OCP staff, also my peers here in the cannabis community. Appreciate the opportunity to present testimony this morning on the proposed rules. My name is Brett Messer. I'm a resident of Biddeford. My business is headquartered in Saco. I've been a medical patient for 15 years, a vertically integrated business owner for 12 years. I'm a member of the Maine Craft Cannabis Association. I have a master's degree in medical cannabis science from the University of Maryland. I read Director Hudak's book in my first semester, which I found to be a good resource during my study. So my hope when you came here was that we would be able to work on some of the issues that we've had with this office over the years. It's extremely disappointing that each year, as long as I can remember, that I've got to come here to Augusta and defend the rights of the medical cannabis program, its patients and small business owners. Once again, the OCP has failed to engage stakeholders to amend our rules. Additionally, the office has not demonstrated an ability to enforce existing rules or even to make small improvements to the existing rules. So why, as business owners, would we trust a full rewrite that's been conducted with virtually zero input from us? These full rule rewrites are costing taxpayers and program participants hundreds of thousands of dollars. And as an entire industry, we're fed up with this approach. We are here, we're willing to work with you, and we're hoping to start seeing that willingness on your end. I think the biggest issue here is a systemic bias toward the adult use program. It's a poison pill. The AU lobbyists sold it and OCP ate it because complex regulations mean job security. And OCP's boss, the executive branch of our government, enjoys the tax windfall. What should be glaringly obvious is that despite consistent attacks on the medical program, medical cannabis in Maine stands as the more efficient and productive program. It offers affordable and safe access to cannabis, and it includes a vast number of local small business owners. And if you guys are sitting there ready to refute my claim, then I challenge the office to prove otherwise through action. I'm not sure what type of economic impact studies the office has conducted. So I just want to talk about some high-level realities in the cannabis industry, both locally here in Maine and nationwide. Sales are down 20 to 50%, and our costs have increased 30 to 40% over the last 2 years. These conditions are largely brought upon by a global recession tied to COVID and poor monetary policy at the federal level. This is not the time to be OCP's guinea pigs on total rule rewrites. If the OCP would like to actually pass any rule changes, which you should know by now is highly unlikely using this full rewrite approach, I would recommend that you work with stakeholders to make small and incremental improvements to the program, not what OCP thinks are improvements, what patients and small business owners tell you are improvements. There are too many issues with the current rule proposed to address them verbally here. So Maine Craft Cannabis Association will address those issues line by line in writing. The most glaring issues are telehealth access, patient privacy and caregiver stores, egregious open-ended fines, changes in outdoor cultivation, and lack of options for caregivers to expand their business without moving into a dispensary license. Every year we hear how medical is underregulated and unsafe, metric testing, blah, blah, blah. Well, where's the smoking gun? Where are the public health issues? Where is the illness? Where is the death? Again, there is none. So let's stop with the time and money wasting madness. Thank you for your time today. As always, I'm available for any sort of follow-up via email, phone, or so. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Nathan Steele. Nathan Steele, are you here? Okay, I'll set Nathan aside in case he comes back in. Travis Terrelci. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. All right, we'll put Travis aside. Ben Shaw.
How's it going? My name's Ben Shaw. I live in Topsom. Appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity here, but like Brett and everyone else kind of said, it's a little crazy that we have to keep spending money to come back up here. A lot of my more important points have already been touched on, so I'm not gonna, spend any time on that. My one that wasn't touched on was the fact of trip tickets needing to be on department paper. Like we do delivery, we put a lot of older people, a lot of disabled people, a lot of people in rural areas. We go a lot of places people won't, just for that reason, to give people access, because that was our why we opened when we started. When we had our inspection, I had a department paper and I had a trip ticket that I made up myself on Word on my computer. And I said, I said, this is my idea of what a more efficient trip ticket is, because we are delivery, because we do that, all the information's here, but we don't have to spend 75 cents to get them printed on whatever, or so on and so forth. It's substantially easier to use like an invoice formatted trip ticket with, all information is very legible, super easy to read. I'd argue almost easier than the department form. But like maybe adjusting that slightly to adding, like a header of some sort or something along those lines is something that's easier to produce, cuts down on paper, with everyone trying to go do everything greener. I would think that that shouldn't be that crazy of an option. The other thing was with labeling, labeling bags with trip tickets is, that's doable enough, but that's also could be misconstrued. And like we have bags that are this big, like how are we gonna fit a whole trip ticket labeled on the bag? That's not super doable. And then a lot of the other labeling and packaging requirements, it just all kind of equates back to metric and track and trace, but in a manual form, which, like everyone said, essentially costs are going up and prices are going down. So it's, adding more things that take our time up, so on and so forth. Everyone here, for the most part, is small scale. Everyone is here because they care and want to be here and want to see this program work and work well. We want to work with you guys, but it just seems like we're always back up here trying to fight for our life. It's a little bit crazy. And then if I have a little bit more time, I'll go back to the other stuff, but essentially, like we work with a lot of disabled folks, like disabled in many different fashions, and taking like the American Disabilities Act says that they should have equitable access to essentially everything. So it's like, we're going back 50 years here and, trying to take away things that these people don't have access to is kind of crazy. Especially disadvantaged people and in rural areas, like just, we are in Maine, like you can get up in the middle of nowhere for, pretty quick, but there's only a couple places that aren't. But yeah, I think that's about it. I would argue that, disabled people might have a hard time putting the fence up too. And like for instance, we have a patient who grows, a couple plants, maybe it's a little close to the road. For instance, I asked them last week and if they ever had any issues. So I'd say they're probably 20 feet off the road, their fence or whatever, it's not a fence, it's their firewood, they got, stacked in trees in front of the plant. And their house is probably half the size of this room, got a hole in the roof, so on and so forth, like, just because they want medicine to produce for themselves, they shouldn't have to. This guy doesn't have the money to put up a fence. I asked him if he's ever had any issues. He said he's been growing there for 20, 30 years. Well, just like that, less than this distance off the road, when like I can see him, but he never had any problems. So it's like, I don't know, it's just, if we could not create more problems if needed, that would be awesome.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
All right, I saw a few people come in while Ben was testifying, and I had called a couple of names of people in order, so I just wanted to go back in case. Did Nathan Steele and or Travis Terelshi come in? Come on up, Nathan. Travis, are you here? Okay, I'll have you next.
My name is Nathan Steele. I'm an out-of-state medical patient. I would like to preface by saying that this is my first time making an appearance here. I'm a longtime worker. I've been paying attention to everything that's been going on. The reason that I showed up today is because you guys decided to get rid of the Zoom meets for many patients, and I find that to be extremely un-American. You are cutting off representation to many people who need it. And you guys may think that stifling and squandering the people's reputation will help your cause, but in reality, you're waking up sleeping giants like me. While we're on the topic of hindering the people, let's talk about how you want to eliminate the option for the people to use telemedicine to get their med cards. Removing the telemed option helps absolutely nobody, not even yourselves. You're taking money out of your own pockets because so many people are going to not renew their card. I don't know if that's the goal, but you're losing a lot of tax money by that. Shooting your own revenue in the foot. And it doesn't make sense why in 2023, you guys are trying to make people's lives harder. It makes no sense. Just about everything in these new proposed rules and like all the 94 pages that I read was just morally wrong. So morally wrong that it's hard for me to even pinpoint what exactly needs to be addressed in my 5 minutes. As an out-of-state patient, if these new rules were to be passed, the state would lose not only my money, but many other out-of-state money. So that $300 million that you guys see that cannabis brings in each year, that's going to drop. Yeah, and over-regulated medical markets, that just breeds bad business practices and poor quality medicine. You're just creating more problems than you're fixing. And honestly, like what I just said, the case of breeding bad business practices and poor quality medicine, that's everywhere in the United States that has over-regulated in my hometown or my home state in Massachusetts. If there's one thing that really stood out to me while I was reading all of these rules, it was on page 45, I believe, say section of 7-11D4. And it reads that video surveillance is required for any area within a dispensary retail store where cannabis is stored, displayed, or sold. Video surveillance of cultivation area is required in those areas where harvested cannabis is stored, processed, and cured. Also, manufacturing areas and recordings should be maintained for 14 days. The reason why that stood out to me personally is because I actually just had to buy 2 state-of-the-art security cameras for my home, and that cost me $600. Plus, I have to pay $100 a month for the 72-hour loop feed. So I'm trying to think in my mind, wow, you guys mentioned what, like 8 different places where you're going to have cameras. Like, I just can't imagine how that costs and what that cost is going to come up. And then how much money is that going to be for these people to keep 14-day surveillances? It just doesn't really make much sense there. And like on top of that, these surveillance cameras, they become obsolete so quickly. We all know technology becomes obsolete very quickly. And like I'm wondering, like, who's going to put the bill for all these security cameras? Like, is it really going to be mom and pop shops? And then who's gonna be monitoring all of this footage that you guys want saved for 14 days? And who's gonna make sure that it's not becoming misappropriated in case state inspectors decide to waltz themselves into somebody's facility? That's basically all I've got for now. You guys keep making these rules and you're gonna keep seeing me. Anything to say?
Thanks. As a reminder, the telemedicine options are not eliminated in these rules. They're in statute and they will continue to be honored as they have been since their inception. Okay. Next up, Travis. Thank you. Terrell, if you could introduce your first and last name, because I'm pretty sure I screwed your last name.
Travis Torelli.
Torelli. Oh, okay, that's 2 L's.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's my chicken scratch out of the great town of Saco. I'm with Lobster Fam Farms. I'm a medical caregiver, medical cannabis caregiver. Like to say good day to the cannabis community. Good day to the board members. You guys are part of this cannabis community, however you feel about it. So good day to you as well. I've lived in Maine for about 6 years now. And basically I want to humanize this, give a working man's perspective, a working person's perspective. I don't have any gripes specifically with anything. I just want to say what I'm up to. Lived in Maine for about 6 years. I typically work 8-hour+ days, 7 days a week. I work by myself, gardening, doing everything from popping seeds and taking cuttings to harvesting and hand trimming the finished product. This is more than an industry or a hobby to me. It's a lifestyle. My wife and I are planning on trying to have our first child in the springtime. If I can't be a productive citizen in the great state of Maine, we will be forced to leave. Maine still has that Norman Rockwell feel that so much of America has lost. I am able to work hard at what I am passionate about and make an honest living surrounded by the good people of Maine. I am supportive of access to safe medicine for patients, whatever that looks like legislatively. What I am not supportive is creating a legal framework where hardworking Mainers are forced out of compliance. Please keep in mind that this industry already has more hoops to jump through than most. If your intention is to keep Maine patients and caregivers healthy and thriving, please consider not passing some of these changes as written. I am very supportive of mold and pesticide-free medicine in the future. But again, please keep in mind what is reasonable and what is not. We inhale more aspergillus walking through the parking lot coming here than most states allow you to have on finished cannabis. It's just not reasonable. So please keep that in mind when these regulations come. Do what's fair and logical for people's health, not what other states decree are safe levels with no supporting science or data as to what is an unsafe amount. I feel Maine is one of the last medical cannabis programs in the country that has any shred of sensibility. Please don't allow what we have here to be changed by lobbying, whether it be out-of-state monopolies, in-state power players, all the way up to out-of-country oligarch-funded cannabis institutions, because they are out there. I'm not sure if you guys realize some of these big names are funded by Russian oligarchs that have endless pockets. And I doubt that their interests are aligned with America or the great people of Maine. So that's about it. I just wanted to give my spiel and I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you for your time, Travis. Next up, I have Elise Spalding. Are you here, Elise?
Good morning, or I guess almost afternoon at this point. My name is Elise. I'm from Scarborough, and I'm here in representation of my small business and farm, as well as the protection of our medical program. The proposed rules are extremely dangerous for medical patients and caregivers. It leaves our caregiver licenses in the hands of a subjective assessment. It also provides a platform and blueprint for the debunkment of small family-owned farms and small businesses such as myself. I know we've already gone through a lot of this, but in section 10, page 74, I know there are some other healthcare workers here. This was a major issue for me and also a major concern. So section 10, page 74, a major violation which will lead to the revokement of includes making claims about health or physical benefit of cannabis or cannabis products for medical use, which means if a patient comes to one of us as a medical storefront or directly to a medical caregiver, et cetera, and says, which strain can help me sleep? I cannot answer that or direct the medical patient because we could get our license revoked. It takes away our ability to care for our patients' medical needs, which is why the patients are seeking plant medicine in the first place. They need our guidance, which is also why we have a medical program. Another example of a major violation on section 10, page 74, engaging in a pattern of minor violations. However, it doesn't list how many minor violations or the credentials that would qualify for this. So it basically leaves it up to the department to subjectively decide whether a license can be taken because of a minor violation or a stack of minor violations. So I would really appreciate more clarity on that. I think that's very vague and also subjective. Page 75, the last minor violation says other conduct that demonstrates an intentional, willful, or reckless disregard of the rules governing by medical cannabis program or the act. So basically, this means to me as an operator that you can subjectively decide what else qualifies as a major violation and take my license away if you decide to do so. It's difficult to believe that the ability to operate my small business that sustains me and my family could be taken away based on the vague rules of an unfair requirement. I think that I can speak for everyone here when I say that this leaves us all really uneasy. In section 2, this is the fence. I know that we've kind of beat this dead, but I think it's a major violation of patient rights, especially just, hearing the cost of, obviously the cost of fencing right now is probably triple what it was, 3 to 4 years ago, but I think it's a huge cost to burden on a medical patient. I think that asking for reasonable, clear, fair, concise rules in order to operate our businesses and gardens according to the standard that our department is supposed to be providing us doesn't seem unreasonable. Thank you for taking the time. I just want to say in summary, I don't think it's the fact that we don't want rules. We all want rules and regulations. We want them to be clear and fair. For someone like me that holds military benefits, I don't want my license or my small business to be taken away from me because of a violation that you subjectively decided that it's okay to take away my license. I think that having something that is descriptive, we want to follow rules. I think we all want to know what the rules are and not have, things like limited to in our rules and our proposed policy. I think that the vagueness is what makes us all uneasy. I think that the subjectiveness is what makes it all uneasy for us. They should be clear, they should be concise, it should be this many feet. If your town ordinance is this, then X, Y, and Z. And this is why I think that us all working together is the best way to solve it, because we know what's kind of doable in the community and for caregivers and patients and what's not. And to have something so vague really makes me nervous, because it's just leaving it up to maybe how that inspector feels on that day. You know what I mean? And I don't want my business to be taken from me based on how somebody feels that day. I want it to be, you violated this regulation. These were the rules. You didn't follow them. Your fence is 10 feet. It should be 12 feet. I want to know exactly what you want. I don't want to know if it's to prevent animals. I want you to say, this is what suffices. This is what does not, or even this is what suffices. Don't even tell us what does not, because then it's mute at that point. So I think I can speak for everybody where we say we just want clarity. We don't want to have a vague rule when our business or our plant medicine is on the line.
Thank you, Elise. Okay, the next person I have, Cynthia Sommer Hernandez, who has probably the most beautiful handwriting I have ever seen in my life.
She's in another room, I'll let
Former teacher.
Anna was.
All right, I'll set her aside.
Yeah, so I just want to, while we're waiting for the next person to come and testify, I just wanted to clarify something that we've been researching throughout the morning. And there's been a lot of discussion around the requirement for patients to have a fence. And that is in the rule, and it is a drafting error that we did not intend. Yeah, wasn't removed from the prior rule. So we don't intend that to stay. We will be removing that in the final version before it goes to the legislature. But we do appreciate everybody bringing it to our attention.
This is the type of stuff that's like why we think you got a bunch of.
Next up is Robert Thibodeau.
Honest to God. Like, you guys are such a waste of time. This whole thing is a show. Jesus Christ.
Hi, I'm Robert Thibodeau from High Road LLC.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah.
I'm Robert Thibodeau from High Road LLC. I own about 6 businesses right now. And something that was a little bit concerning to me was this last batch of testing, random tests we did. And when you go to a business owner and you ask for something off the shelf without compensation, they're probably going to give you the lowest thing, lowest grade thing they've been having trouble selling. And I just really feel like the testing was kind of stacked up against us. I actually passed the testing, but the one time I was probably a little bit nervous about passing the testing was that right there. And I think the results from it kind of show, I don't know, it doesn't really support like the numbers that these testing facilities kind of have as far as like the percentage of people that usually fail when they go for testing. I just kind of think that stacking it in that way is kind of not legitimate information. And I don't know. And then the fact that the information was kind of leaked to the news after just kind of seems like another attack on caregivers. And I don't really feel like it was handled properly. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say today was, this testing thing, it seems like you guys played your cards pretty well as far as throwing it on us. And was the same thing done with rec? Do you have numbers for like people going into rec stores and doing testing right off the shelf? Because like right now, I know they're radiating product to get rid of mold and microbial stuff and stuff like that. They're putting it in radiation machines and killing the material, like killing the live organisms in it by doing that. I don't think really caregivers have access to that type of stuff or would really want to even use stuff like that. That's about it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Robert. Next up, before I jump to the next person, I just wanted to see if Cynthia Sommer Hernandez came back. Okay, next up, Catherine Lewis.
My
Good
name is
afternoon.
Catherine Lewis. I'm a caregiver, patient, and I'm also board chair of Medical Cannabis Caregivers of Maine Trade Association. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Most of my testimony has been touched on by everybody else. I do want to clarify some of the talk around the offenses, and I appreciate that the patients will not be held to that standard, but even the small caregivers, changing the language from a 6-foot privacy fence to a 6-foot security commercial grade fence will put a lot of people out, and is, in our opinion, not necessary. Adult use does not even require for people to have their fencing. So well, it does apply to caregivers.
Catherine, just direct your comments to the chair and the audience. It'd be great if you only participated when you were called to testify. Thank you.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
No, you're.
I think it still applies to caregivers, correct? So some caregivers already have their fencing, and to require to change it to the commercial grade does not make sense. Especially where there are so many people out there being able to grow outside without any fencing whatsoever. Changing that language makes a big difference to people. The concerns around patient registration of new grows is just one step from patient registry. So there's concerns around that. The other concerns that I had are a little more in detail to the storefronts or the providers that like the security cameras and having to be able to make available any and all records as deemed by the inspectors could put patients' privacy at risk. And so I have concerns about that. So if you came into my shop and wanted all my records, maybe I had a theft in the store, but I also have a separate room where I meet with patients. That's still part of my
my facility, I would not be willing to give up that part of the recordings because patients are in there talking about their personal health issues. So I think that some clarity around what we would be required to have for an inspector is really important because we've had multiple inspections and some of the inspectors are okay with certain aspects and other inspectors are not. And when I've asked, I've been told it's really up to the inspector. So we need them all to be on the same page with what it is that we're giving. Some of the documentation that were required under the, and I have written the sections for you. Were the record keeping for like employment records. It's not required by state law in any other business to have certain areas that's listed under the record keeping that's required. Also for like the LLCs, it will reject an application if they don't have the operating agreement. Well, a sole member LLC isn't going to have an operating agreement, doesn't have to have an operating agreement. So now what you're getting from these people are just printed off from the internet that has nothing to do with their actual businesses, and that's okay. So we're doing unnecessary paperwork that requires a lot of time, effort, and money to get done. That's not actually needed by the department to oversee the statute that's in there. So I'd like to see a little more detail, and I'll give you the testimony that has those items that just, it sounds like it's just thrown out there as paperwork. And there's a lot of busy work that doesn't make sense. Again, everybody has spoken on the other pieces, so I don't get those again. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay. All right, I have next, Jonathan Bune. It looks like it's Beune.
Yeah, that's just right? Jonathan B.
Oh, gotcha.
I will be just a small caregiver out of Waterville. Just 12 plant account license, and sorry I'm not super prepared today on all the pages and laws. I just wanted to come up here and represent just small batch craft Maine and say that a lot of it is, I don't think, in the best interest of any real caregivers or growers really passionate about the plant. If people do care about it a lot and want to clean their medicine or their food or anything, they go about that. The general census in the nation is that, our breakfasts are filled with sugar, this and that. It's up to the person to decide how healthy or unhealthy they want to live. When it comes down to a plant and just testing and enforcing requirements, there's a lot of SOPs across labs that aren't general, or depending on the equipment that they use, comes with a different SOP, et cetera, et cetera. And within that, the process to remediate to actually create clean weed in the legal industry becomes really messy when you're actually involved with that and actually trying to go through and do that. And I believe that it's pretty unfortunate that we're sitting around playing, hey, we care, we want to do this and that, when there's a lot of people like me and other small caregivers that just want to grow small scale, 610 lights, provide the best quality they can, brand, clean, do whatever, and then have to play around with a lot of these rules and notions that at the end of the day, if someone wants to grow a plant, smoke, they can. And just because it's combustible in the main form of intaking, like you can smoke marigolds, you can smoke whatever, herbs and stuff that you mugwort, whatever that you deem as healthy. That being said, to push a bunch of testing and regulations on these caregivers and passionate people that really, at the end of the day, do care about the patient. And I do test my weed. I do pass full testing through Nova as a 4-light caregiver, actually 2 lights right now. And it cost me more than I pretty much make on a room to pretty much showcase the passionate craft people, what they want to do and want to show Maine. And we're fighting in a market that recreational, it has so many stipulations. All these big companies recreational are medical too. Everything that people are sitting here vouching for to try to keep going applies to everyone else in the same game, making way more money. I've worked literally right next to all these big people, seen all their strategies, seen what they do. You want to pass testing, dip it in xylitol. The SOPs from the labs are to grind out your weed, leave it under UV, put it in for remediation, you'll pass. Okay, cool. You got a bunch of pre-rolls. Are you going to say that everyone, remediated microwave the rest of the weed that goes into the stores fronts, I don't see that being checked just because there's that initial check that kind of just is all steer clear, and then news reports and tests start coming out against the medical industry, which then cause my patients to come to me and say, hey, why is it that medical weed that should be beneficial isn't tested, but recreational is? And it is a great question. And there should be a lot more conversations about the actual medical benefits, cannabinoids, terpene profile, the entourage effect, what it's actually doing for people, and not necessarily a lot of these fence talks and, oh, let's fill out this paperwork or that. I think we're mostly adults that are trying to get into this industry and stay in it. And a lot of us understand legalities and the problems and the funding and, everything that has to go along with that. And paperwork and documentation and stuff is just a no-brainer. But for it to make sense and for it to actually assist, people like me, actually staying afloat and doing what I do and providing that without insanity, just propaganda pushing, because no one hit me up about my tests. No one checked anything, and I'm getting inspected under a 12-plant count license. When I talked to all the caregivers for 5-6 years under routine inspection, they never got one. And I'm not here to push inspections or testing. But when I sit there for an hour going over paperwork of 12 plants that I'm growing, making no money, and then they walk into the little tiny room with 2 lights and say, oh, wow, this is cleaner than I've normally ever seen. These plants are crazy. An inspection normally means when you get a food inspector, you see a rat running around, you're probably going to fail. Well, if you walk into a facility, you see mold, you see bugs. Why is that even a question? Why even look at the paperwork? Who even cares who's getting taxes? Like, the fact of the matter is, if you care about patients right then and there, you can be like, well, you're not growing weed, you're growing mites, you're growing PM, you're growing bud rot, you're growing whatever, and then y'all know that when you concentrate that, it gets even worse. And the fact of the matter is that instead of, benefiting, Maine Med and helping that and working together along with the rec side, it seems like this whole rec narrative is being squelched out the med quite a bit. And I just really want to have a guarantee that I can invest in the business, invest in the state, try to do it properly, try to grow my brand, try to just have some really clean, awesome weed and not have to worry about, oh, hey, just kidding. That's it.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, next up I have Rachel Mestis. Rachel.
Hi, my name is Rachel Mestis. I'm a med patient. Hi to all my folks out there, my peeps. I'm here today to tell you that these rules have the feel of an incomplete school project. The whole thing needs to be scrapped. These laws, rules should be specifically be written to support and protect medical patients and caregivers. Yeah. For example, to protect med patients. I'm a med patient. I'm not allowed to smoke in my apartment, to vape in my apartment or outside. I have to walk down the road. Do people that take blood pressure medication, they gotta walk down the road, take their meds? No, they don't. But I do. There's no law to protect me as a med patient. My taxes that I pay when I go to the cannabis store, they go to you folks. We need laws of support. Our caregivers, support the med patients, protect us from these types of things. And education, the taxes should be going to education about cannabis too. We need to get rid of this stimula. This is the #1 cash crop in the state of Maine, and we're treating the caregivers like doo-doo, making all these rules that really just trying to push them out of business. And it's ridiculous and it's old. And we need something new that's going to support the medical patients and the caregivers. Quit making these laws, these rules to try and make their lives difficult. It's crap. Common sense tells you you're going to put a fence around your outdoor grow because you don't want the deer eating it. Why do we need a law that tells us to do something like that? Any caregiver is going to protect their property. They don't need you to tell them how to do it. They're going to lock their stuff up as they see fit. This is America. We should be made to allowed to use our common sense. All right, got some more to say. I'm not done yet. Since it's Maine's #1 cash crop, we should be openly showing how much we care about our caregivers. We appreciate their hard work. We appreciate that they're educated and they're getting clean medicine out there. And as a patient, I'm not gonna go to a store, don't go to a caregiver, any dispensary that's growing mold or that is gonna sell something that tastes nasty. Guess what? That person's not gonna be in business very long. You know what that is? It's laissez-faire, it's that fair hand of the market. You let the consumer decide. So that person over there, that caregiver is growing crappy weed, they're not gonna be in business long. This person over here is going all organic, doing good stuff. I mean, they're gonna get the business, but we don't need all these rules and regulations. What we need is laws that protect the caregivers and the med patients. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next up, I have Judge Strong. Sorry. And you're welcome to come up to the podium. I just wanted to do a little housekeeping. This is the last registration form I have. Is there anyone else in the room who I haven't called who wants to testify? 2, 3, 4. Okay, 5. Okay, so it's 12:20. I think we can get through these 6 people instead of breaking an hour for lunch and then coming back just for 6 people. So Judd, happy to hear testimony.
And I'll just make sure this. Okay, great. Thank you.
How are we doing? I'm Judd Strang. I own a couple dispensaries in Trenton. I've seen you guys in my stores before. I always welcome you. First, I just want to say we don't have a problem with the testing, like certain things, that's no problem. I am opposed to it, like the sampling, that was no issues. You guys came in, did our things. I'm opposed to, like, you go to Grow Generations or somewhere in Brewer and you'll see 100, no offense, Asian people there growing illegal weed everywhere. We get lumped into that same category that everybody's doing illegal, the Boston Caramel that happened. Like, we, all medical people, get lumped into this same program for no reason. We get the bad apple for no reason. The testing numbers came out the first day, it was like 8% failed in the media, then it was 21%. And then 2 days before this meeting, it was 54%. Like, where do these numbers come from? Can we see them? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what's the truth? Nobody knows the truth anymore. The fencing, I understand it's not a patient thing anymore. Thank you for clarifying that. The telemedicine also, we use Julie Milliken. She's a great person to have the access to telemedicine. Sorry, I'm unprepared. The bud tenders unable to give recommendations for the product that we sell or we grow. I think we know more about the product that we grow and sell and consume ourselves than anybody that can tell us that we don't. It makes no sense to be able to give a recommendation. The person can go online and look up the strain and it's going to tell them the same thing that we're going to tell them. It's public information, and for them to, I don't know the rule number or the chapter that it's in, but for them to not be able to speak on a product that we sell and we grow and we know, it's kind of, it's criminal. And to revoke a license, logos, you know, attracting the kids, what attracts the children? Do we know that? You know what I mean? There's no clarification in laws, like the fines and violations concern me. But I welcome you guys at any time to come visit. That doesn't bother me one bit. I just want to run a proper business. I got inspected 4 times in a month and a half. I don't know what you guys are looking for, but my business hasn't changed in 7 years. It's the same thing. It's the same grow location. I have the same stores. Like, nothing ever changes. It just keeps getting harder. You guys aren't welcoming. I feel like I have to defend myself constantly. The first question Mr. Gunderson asked me when he came to do my tour was, how come you're not recreational? I'm not recreational because I don't want to fund a program that'll put my medical business out of business. That's the reason I don't want anything to do with recreational. I completely opposed to these new rules. I mean, they were written 3 years ago. What's wrong with them? Why are we writing them again? Like, it's a repeat. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of all of our money, all of our times. Like, it's, when did it stop? And that's pretty much it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Just as a bit, sorry. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Gabby. Just as a bit of clarification about part of the reason why we're here today. Some of the rule changes, actually quite a number of the rule changes that we have are happening because of legislation that was passed in the previous legislative session. And so we need to bring rules up to meet those expectations. We've also engaged in regulatory look back, which is involved engaging with stakeholders, hearing their concerns and their complaints to find ways that we can streamline certain areas of the rules. Next up, for those of you who raised your hand before, I got a stack of papers that showed up. So some of you might be on here, but I'll give each of you time in case your form isn't here. Ashley Sear. Welcome, Ashley.
Hi, how are you?
You time.
My name is Ashley Sear, from Dexter, Maine. I'm a single mother, patient, a homeowner, a voter, a landowner, and a recovered addict who's found very healing and recovery inside this cannabis community. And I live a full life of recovery today within this community. All right.
You're fine.
But it doesn't really matter why I'm here today, what I do, who I am, because I'm not here to speak for myself. What I am here for is going to be uncomfortable. You maybe even feel attacked. Maybe you should. I don't know. Dave Rosha, Chad Healy, Eric White, Nate Spunion, JB Melissa, Joshua Hall, Christopher Hathaway, Brian Weber. These are just a few of the names I have right off the top of my head. Sorry, this is emotional for me. It's one of the reasons why I almost didn't come. I'm here for a completely different reason. To ask you exactly what are we doing? Why are we continuing to waste tax money, our time, resources, every second we spend here, every dollar wasted on cannabis reform takes away from saving these lives? I'm here to ask you what you were doing. Why our efforts are not focused on dealing with these Chinese gangs running our streets, not only ruining the cannabis market, but flooding our street with very illegal, deadly drugs. Also contributing to the huge human trafficking issue that we all face today. The war on drugs isn't over. We're fighting it right here, right now. Every second we spend here is a slap in the face to every mother who has lost a son, every sister who's lost a brother, a loving wife who's lost a husband. It's a slap in the face to every child who had to watch their parent be drugged to jail and prisons and had to go to foster care with strangers, sometimes being seriously abused and molested because their parents chose to grow cannabis. Not to mention the people who actually serve years of their lives behind bars. I see OCP continuing to attack, overregulate, and crucify a small community of local farmers who are doing nothing but trying to heal the communities, trying to offer hope, help, jobs to struggling people in these broken down, drug-ridden old mill towns where the real dangerous drugs are, and they're taking lives. You're making it harder and harder to help these caregivers provide healing and hope to these people in our communities, like it did for me. The single moms of our communities fighting against all odds, getting $65 a month in child support, dependent on food stamps, trying to create a life incapable of even being qualified for other work because we can't spell or we're bad at computers. The only thing we can do is grow plants. The cannabis industry, addiction, to get themselves out of the depths of addictions and poverty by the help of the cannabis and the cannabis industry. I come to you today not only as a patient, but as a mother who's scared to death every day with her kids growing up, approaching adulthood that will come into contact with fentanyl or meth and die in the streets like so many before them. I come to you as a taxpayer to ask, what are you doing? Why are we here? Where is my money going? Because as a taxpayer, I don't want my money going here. It's a gross waste of time. It's a gross waste of tax money, and every second and cent we waste here is a second and cent that we could use to be saving somebody's life. Like the 10,110 people affected in 2022. And this is according to the Mills administration by overdoses. You're sitting here. Why aren't you sitting in another room having a meeting about that? Why are our kids dying when they could be being healed?
Don't want my money to go in this. It's a gross waste of tax money, and every second we waste, I'll say it over and over again, could be used to be saving someone's life. I see you ruining our legal market, pushing caregivers and small craft farmers to the streets and the black markets because people are going to feed their kids no matter what. They have always fed their kids and they will. You're prosecuting people over and over again for a plant. Just like tomatoes. How many people have cannabis killed? Do we have a number? Is it in your paperwork? Because I can pull up right now how many people have died of fentanyl.
You're at time, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next I have Sean Wyatt.
Hello, Dr. Hey. My name is Sean Wyatt. I'm here with Alternative Care and Elevate Maine.
Sean, could you just speak up a little? I'm make sure the microphone can pick
Sorry
up.
about that. Just a question, why are we writing the rules again? I mean, I understand the glaring changes in medical program, but there hasn't been any since the last time we've ever written. I know you stated there's been legislation change, but you haven't really cited what's forcing the rule to change. See a lot of new penalties and violations. Major violations include having to return your previous card once obtaining a new card within a limited amount of time. Failure to do so and get your new card voided. What if your old card's like lost or damaged? What good is an old card to anybody? What about the ones I've had for the past 13 years? Making claims about health or health benefits of cannabis. What about the provisional law that states as a medical cannabis provider, you need to inform the patients about cannabis as well as provide them written materials about the cannabis provided. Engage in marketing or advertising cannabis products by or on behalf of a registrant to individuals under 21 or individuals who are not qualifying patients. Is that an ad in a magazine they saw? That is a 21 plus? Is that something they heard on the radio when you've done your what is it, product or the evaluation of what their demographic is, that they tell you that it's over 21 for this time provided, which OCP officers have told me is what is under regulation as permitted. Failing to appropriately secure any areas where cannabis or cannabis products for medical use are cultivated, manufactured, stored, packaged, labeled, or sold in accordance to the governing medical cannabis program, including without limited to cultivation. Does that mean if you leave the door unlocked once, is that a major violation? If you're robbed and they can smash the door in, like how hard they smash it, is that a violation? I guess since pesticides are a hot topic right now, in my 13 years of operating caregiver business, I've only ever been tested once by OCP, and that was last month. I saw that WNTW did a news investigation, so I reached out to them about the report because it seemed like their information was skewed. So they came and they interviewed me on just a couple of things. I like to point out that the 20% of voluntary samples from caregivers was testing positive is a good thing because it shows we're policing this industry and we're making sure it doesn't make it to retail sales. 0% would kind of be alarming because then, I mean, there's thousands of cultivators, so we're not testing their product, and to think that that wouldn't come up as a positive result potentially for so many cultivators bringing new product into your retail facilities. If I test a sample that's brought in for potential sale and it's positive for pesticides, doesn't mean it makes a shelf, just means that it wasn't purchased or used. But since I sent that test in, which you need to have an account with these businesses, it's associated with a caregiver. And then, so how would you enforce pesticide testing? Would it be metric? I mean, I don't see that as being a silver bullet. There's easy ways around that where you could either purchase product from somebody else that you know is clean and just say that's going for my 30,000 square foot cultivation facility. If you're a person that is spraying pesticide and is doing things illegally, what's stopping you from doing that? And it's not like there's a state officer there checking off each product, making sure that that product that you're testing or getting tested is coming from that facility. The testing needs to be at the point of sale, just like you know that because that's what you just did. You went to point of sale. That's what you did. That should be where it's done. You can test there. You can get any product that you want and not enforce caregivers to pay 15 to 30% of whatever their wholesale cost is of cannabis on testing that they know their product is safe. So that's really just the points I'd like to make, you know. I'd like to see, it's not that I don't want testing in this industry. I'd like to see that happen. You know, I'd like to see it done right. But I just think that, you know, if we were to pursue any other ways where you had to test every single product that you had sold and have a provided test for mold, mildews, and pesticides, that's just a huge burden on the industry that I don't think it can. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Arlie Kraus.
Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Arlie Kraus. Thank you for allowing me to speak at this medical rules hearing. I'm a registered caregiver from Warren, Maine. I've been a registered caregiver in this program for close to 15 years. I'm a member of Seed to Health Learning Health Alliance, a founding member of the Maine Craft Cannabis Association, a member of the Maine Cannabis Union, the chair of the Warren Cannabis Committee, and was also on the now defunct State of Maine Cannabis Advisory Committee. Sure, I'm leaving other things out, but that's okay. Today I am here to just ask a couple questions, and I will be submitting written testimony on the proposed changes as well. Firstly, I would like to ask about the proposed promise guidance documents for inspections. I know we had met as the Cannabis Council multiple times, and the OCP agreed to create a guidance document for inspections. It's really important, really useful for notice. It keeps people from panicking, and it really like makes everyone across the board be on the same page. So I'm hoping that if more input is needed, you know, I can be a resource. My colleagues in this room can be a resource. Seed to Health can be a resource. Secondly, I'm curious about the research grant process. I know that Director Hudak stated it was a priority last spring to get this grant process going. And I testified at hearings along with my colleagues from Seed to Health and also Susan Meehan and a bunch of other folks in this room about the importance of a research fund, not only, you know, just for, you know, looking at the cannabinoid system in plants or endocannabinoid system in people, but also we could do a lot of this stuff with pesticide testing and really try to figure out what works, what doesn't, and come up with some lists of safe products in the state that my colleagues and I at Seed to Health currently are building right out of our pockets. And going into testing, I am fully transparent. I am someone who has failed testing, not out of anything that I've deliberately sprayed or put on my plants, but from using products that are listed as recertified. And then, you know, going back, tracing it out. And thank goodness I work with such fabulous people in Seed to Health. They actually collaborated with me and came up with the cost of testing, which would have been thousands of dollars to actually pay for this. So instead of, you know, this top heavy approach where we're, you know, coming down and bringing this industry down, let's lift it up from the bottom and say, how can we support this industry? What can we do? How can we work with these people that are experts in this room here, you know, or, you know, outside of these walls right now, to make this program better? I just, in a society right now where, you know, on Maine Public this morning, they said that there's over 2 jobs for every single person in the state of Maine. It would be shameful to, you know, threaten people with losing their ability to work when it doesn't have to be that way. And we have a fabulous program here in Maine. And if testing is, you know, something that we need to pursue, let's figure out how to do it so it's not so costly, and so that the people that don't, necessarily want testing as patients can have that option, and then the folks that do, they can pass, and we can help them do that. I don't know, I think that's pretty much all I have, but if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Arlie. I'll respond to one of the questions you had about the research grant
Thank you.
program. It remains a priority. We're actively working on it. I was having meetings just last week with some of my peers in other states that do have research grant programs. The way I look at it is we're going to get one bite at this apple, and I want to make sure that we're doing it right and we don't have to go in and do a lot of cleanup. We're talking about, as you noted, a really serious issue, a real potential for doing high quality scientific research. As you know, my background is as a scientist also, and so it's something I'm very passionate about. And so I want to make sure that given the amount of taxpayer money that is earmarked for that account, and the importance of that research, that we get it right. And so we are having conversations with researchers. We are having conversations with peer states that do have these kinds of research grant programs in place to make sure that the science is done right, that politics is kept out of it. Most importantly, the politics is kept out of it, and that we're able to provide a real genuine research-based public service for the patients and the people of Maine. So I just wanted to update you on that. And thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. Do you have any idea when that will be issued?
I don't have a timeline on that right now. I'll definitely be in touch with you. I know this is a passion project for you as well. And so we're still in the information gathering stage. And so, like I said, I don't want to commit to a timeline because we don't even have necessarily a specific internal timeline right now.
One other thing that just reminds me of, if I can just have like 2 more seconds. I think another huge issue that we're facing is the energy. We have money coming into, this program, and it is really unfortunate that the cannabis program can't get anything to help us with our energy costs. And that should really be a priority for Maine because our carbon footprint is enormous with these indoor grows. There's a REAP program, REAP program, that's available to commercial agriculture farms. So anyone who is not involved in cannabis, because it's a federal program. But if there were a way to allocate some of the funds that come in to the medical program, specifically for energy, either upgrading with solar panels or something like that to reduce some of the power that CMP has to, generate or another energy provider has to generate, that would be really significant. And I certainly know it would help all of the colleagues, in Maine who are in this industry as well, whether you're in adult use or in medical.
On that note, Arlie, we don't have statutory authority to earmark money for that purpose. That would require legislative change. We have a few legislators here in the room. If that's something that there's interest in, and it sounds like you've talked to people in the industry, and there is certainly a conversation to have legislatively.
Great. Well, I'd be willing to, talk to you guys in collaboration with that, because I've definitely spoken to legislators about it, and there's interest. It's just sort of getting everyone in the same boat.
I also just wanted to address your question regarding caregiver inspection checklist.
Yes.
That was published back in February and it's on our guidance document.
It is. Okay.
Website. Yeah.
There's not one for dispensaries or manufacturing.
No, this is for caregiver inspections.
Okay, thank you. Arlie.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Next up, Tim Sutter. And welcome up to the podium, Tim. Just a check of hands raised of anyone who has not yet testified who is interested in testifying. Okay, one more after Tim. Excellent, thank you. Floor is yours.
Hey, thank you. My name is Tim Suter. I live in Topsom, Maine. I'm a member of the Machinists Union, representative of the Machinists Union. I'm representing the Maine Cannabis Union today. I wanted to highlight a couple things out of the testimony that didn't get highlighted earlier. 2023 proposed rule general misalignment with Title 22, Chapter 558C, and other issues. Inspection criteria publicly available for all registrants. D, the department shall adopt rules. Section 1 states establishing standards for compliance with this chapter that are available publicly. The only public available criteria applies to caregivers. They make no law. And where does a dispensary or manufacturing laboratory find their publicly available criteria? We've heard a lot of testimony today. I'm not going to go too much into the stuff about the fencing because that's. But I just wanted to say that, you know, after hearing all the testimony today, these are working class people. These are working issues. And I guess I'll just go on to say that good leadership would perhaps establish the goal of inspections to encourage and develop compliance with program, rule, and law, not to regulate segments of the industry out of business. If people are afraid of repercussions rather than anticipating assistance in solving a problem, they are less likely to report or be honest about a problem. This is a big industry in this state. There's been a lot of great testimony today. Business owners, workers, and patients. And I hope you take that into consideration in opposing meetings.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, and then the last gentleman in the back, like to come forward. Oh, you do have a form? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right, I have Jackson McLeod.
Yes, thank you for the time today. It's definitely appreciate being able to have this conversation with you. I'm coming from Somerville, but I also am a dispensary owner in Portland, cultivation in Somerville as well. And I'm still making up my mind about the proposed rules, and I do understand that change is inevitable and that this change should be done in a way that supports this industry and the people that have been here since the beginning and built it. I guess I'm just have a couple of questions to, maybe help me understand what your thought process is and if I should be supporting this, if I shouldn't be. And quickly reading through, I do just have a couple of questions that have popped up, and I think getting your feedback instead of just blasting out all the stuff that are my problems and business dealings. I do support everybody in the room and everything that we're going through. I want to understand your thought process and amending these rules. The first one is, as a dispensary, we're required to provide educational information. It's in the law that we have to do so, but now it's a major violation if I am to make any claims, health claims about this cannabis. So I guess who's going, this seems very subjective. And I think a lot of my concerns are around the major violations that are written here and understanding how they're going to be defined. Because on one hand, I have to provide this information. On another hand, if I make a health claim, I'm subject to fines that could put me out of business and jeopardize everything that we've built. So I'd love to hear your line of thinking around how that would work out. There's another one in here that it's for required requirements for applicable registered dispensaries that we shall cultivate no more cannabis than is necessary for the purpose of assisting qualified patients. And again, I don't understand how that could be a major violation. And like, how are you coming to these decisions? And it's after going through many inspections, it'd be much easier if I had some clear information and was able to operate around these things. And there's another one around a major violation on pesticides. It used to say that you can't use prohibited pesticides. Now it just says that you can't use pesticides outside of compliance with the act of, I don't know the specifics of it, but and then again, the question is, this is an agricultural crop. How do I know what type of information you guys are gonna be acting with to enforce these rules. Those are like three things that it would just be very helpful to understand your thought process and how you approach this rulemaking and how to be implemented.
So Jackson, I'm happy to take the first question you had about individuals working in dispensaries making health claims. I know part of the reason, and my colleagues can add to it too, part of the reason for that is some cannabis companies have been getting letters from the FDA about health claims being made about cannabis products. And so under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, something that's not an approved medicine, health claims, health and medical benefit claims can't be made about it. And so in a lot of ways, that effort is to make sure that Maine's medical cannabis businesses are staying out of the view of FDA's concerns about those types of health claims. A lot of those have been targeted toward CBD-only companies. But increasingly, those letters are finding their way to what we would call traditional medical cannabis businesses in the U.S., including, full spectrum products. And so that's a real sticking point. I had a meeting just last week with someone from FDA. It is a sticking point for them about the types of health claims that are being made. And, some individuals may be very well versed in research and science around certain cannabis products. But I think FDA's biggest concern are people just making blanket health claims without really having that type of backing. So I can touch on that. I don't know.
Can I just follow up on that? And how would you, how does that exist with the requirement that I provide educational information about cannabis?
So educational information about cannabis, you can certainly talk to a patient about how to use safe and responsible use, things like that, what other patients have experienced in terms of their use. But if you have a patient coming in and you say, this helps fix migraines, that's going to be something that veers into a space where FDA is very uncomfortable, and it begins to run afoul of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act.
As well as our state.
That all makes perfect sense to me. I think what I'm looking for is the ability to come to you to understand prior to an inspection that I'm not going to show you this material at an inspection and then be fined for it. And that's the kind of, I think, thing that would help the OCP better regulate and work with the industry, is having that type of dialogue.
Thank you.
One of your other questions was around pesticides and if I understood the question right, I think it's more semantics around approved pesticides and prohibited pesticides. There is no real list of prohibited pesticides. The way the Board of Pesticide Control treats it is these are pesticides that are acceptable for use on cannabis. Because there is no real list that everything else is prohibited. So I think it's just a semantics change, not a substantive change in how we look at pesticides.
Well, maybe it's my misunderstanding, but the change that seems significant is the amount of money that can be fined for that. And the question is, who is helping define that? Is it the inspector at that time? Is there a dialogue before, so that I make sure that I'm not at a time of inspection then realizing that I'm out of compliance there?
I think our approach won't change in that we're still heavily focused on technical assistance and providing technical assistance at every opportunity we have. But there are some violations that do potentially endanger public health to an extent that, we're not going to give just technical assistance. If we come in and find butanol on your product, Eagle 20, right?
Sure.
Everybody knows Eagle 20 shouldn't be there. We come in and find Eagle 20, test your product, it's hot for mycobutanol, you're well past technical assistance.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things that we'll be looking at.
And then is there anything on the piece where a dispensary license can't ultimate more than they are allowed to, I forget exactly what the language is, assist qualifying patients, and like how that's going to be defined?
And does that mean that there's no wholesale, you can't sell to other
No,
dispensaries?
you can absolutely wholesale to others. That's actually in statute. So that's a statutory requirement. Some of it dates back to when dispensaries had to register patients, so you can only grow for X number of patients who are registered with you. I think what we look for is if you are a dispensary and you have way over cultivated and you're sitting on thousands of pounds of product, the end of the season, the end of the year, with no wholesale relationships, no avenue for that. We would look to you to explain why you grew all that product without an outlet. And what your intentions are with that. Because obviously that without an off ramp for it, it tends to leak out into the illicit market. So, and without product tracing. In medical,
Sure.
it's wide open for that kind of abuse. So I think it's one of those things where we can't say that there's a bright line, like, you get 10 pounds over. We're talking about hundreds of pounds over, maybe thousands.
Well, I think I appreciate your explanation there. To make this less adversarial, I think more definition around those things and making it clear, because there are a lot of people who just grow outdoor and crop out once a year and would sit on that and sell it over the year, and it may look funny to you to show up and have lots of that material hanging around at in November, but then if that goes out, so I think.
Yeah, we understand that.
Yeah, but further definition along those lines would probably make it easier for us to digest that information and understand how to operate properly.
Yeah, and we may not be able to do that without statutory guidance on that.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to answer my questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackson. All right, all testimony having been taken, the public hearing on the Office of Cannabis Policy's proposed rules is now closed. As a reminder, public comment deadline is 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. Comment may be submitted through the Office of Cannabis Policy website or forwarded to my colleague Gabby Pierce, Office of Cannabis Policy at 162 State House Station, Augusta, Maine, 04333-0162. Or by fax at 207-287-2671, or by email at gabby.pierce, Pierce, @maine.gov. And if you could include in the subject line, medical use rulemaking comment, that will be helpful. And so with that, the hearing is now closed. Thank you, everyone.